Mysterious rituals, gnarly burps, bird attacks, UFOs and ghosts. These are live broadcasts that took an unexplained turn. In 2021, an Australian news presenter named Yvonne Young was in the middle of covering a story about a police dog that had been attacked in Brisbane, along with a segment on new legislation, when something strange happened during the broadcast. So right in the middle of the report, the feed suddenly cuts to a completely unrelated clip. One moment it's a standard news segment with officials in suits, and then out of nowhere, a satanic ritual. The newscaster just pauses for a brief moment trying to process what you just saw, but then no acknowledgement, she just continues reading, keeping everything together and moving on with the segment. As for where that ritual footage came from, nobody knows. And this is probably one of my favorite videos on the internet. During this live broadcast in Finland, I believe, this man expertly avoided throwing up on air. Well, technically he did throw up, he just kept himself composed enough to make it as minimally embarrassing as possible. Take a look.
Mikäli maakuntiasukkaat niin haluaa.
I mean, what a hero. We've all burped and had a little bit of liquid come up and had to swallow it, but I mean, that was not a little bit. That was clearly a struggle. You could tell that he knew this was coming the entire time too. He was fighting it as long as he could. Just a few seconds on the clock and he hold it, no. And then... I mean, I haven't seen a save like that ever. If I'm barfing, it's coming out with force. Ursula Heger, a journalist for Channel 10 in Australia, was mid-broadcast doing a fairly standard live report. She was covering a story about an Australian sports figure who'd been accused of harassing a police officer. Well, partway through explaining the details, something completely unexpected really broke the flow. A small bird suddenly swooped down from off camera. At first, it just flew close, but it kept coming back in and repeatedly smacked her in the head. Ursula tried to keep talking through it, clearly fighting to stay focused, but it just kept happening over and over. It looked purposeful, honestly. This bird clearly had some kind of vendetta against this reporter. At one point, she actually crouches down, trying to get out of its flight path, but that really doesn't work either. The bird just flies down lower. It gets to the point where the bird hooks its feet into her hair, tangling itself in while flapping its wings against her head. She does manage to keep going for a bit, but it's obvious she's struggling not to break. Eventually, she loses the battle and then just starts laughing. Luckily, we don't film our videos outside here because I have a hard time getting through these videos without birds flapping in my face. Here's another fun one. This happened a few years ago. Alabama politician Kay Ivey was in the middle of his news conference when this happened.
We're getting a slight increase in the number of doses that we'll be getting to the state.
I've watched this video like 100 times and it never gets old.
We're getting a slight increase.
Listen to that.
We're getting a slight increase.
It's so wet and just meaty. That came from like the guts. Oh, I mean, to call that a burp is a grave injustice. That is a belch. And then she just continues on like nothing happened just there. I mean, if I'm in this situation, right, I'm on live TV, I'm on the news, and I let this deep guttural eruption out, I'm gonna have to give it some acknowledgement. I mean, make a casual joke, you know, address it on some level. I mean, this?
We're getting a slight increase.
That is not something that we just brush past. I mean, how everyone in the background didn't just erupt into laughter is insane too. I mean, that's the unexplained part. On April 27th, 1986, HBO viewers were watching The Falcon and the Snowman when suddenly, right in the middle of the movie, the satellite signal was hijacked and a message appeared on screen. It was protesting HBO's subscription fees for home satellite dish owners. It was a pretty friendly message to anyone not working at HBO anyway, saying, "Good evening, HBO, from Captain Midnight, $12.95 a month? No way. Showtime/movie channel, beware." The interruption lasted about 4.5 minutes. Technicians at HBO tried to regain control of the feed, but the signal was strong enough that they couldn't override it. The broadcast was now out of their control. Eventually, the FBI and FCC tracked the intrusion back to a man named John R. McDougal, an electrical engineer who went by the name Captain Midnight, using equipment from his uplink station in Central Florida. He surrendered and was fined $5,000, sentenced to a year probation, and had his amateur radio license suspended for a year. This next one goes all the way back to October 27, 1968. A bizarre broadcast incident in Palm Springs, California made local headlines when the off-air signal of then new ABC affiliate KPLM-TV was accidentally hijacked with some adult material. Shortly after the station had signed off and switched to its test pattern, viewers suddenly saw the racy film playing instead of the usual blank screen and bars. And it ran for a while too, about 15 minutes before the error was discovered and corrected. Turned out a 25-year-old technician named Alan Veach, who was alone in the studio that morning, had brought the videotape into the building. While he was watching it privately, somehow the playback ended up feeding into the line, going to the cable company distribution center, which was live, sending the signal straight into people's homes. Police arrested Veach after the incident. He later pled guilty in federal court to violating laws against transmitting obscene material, and he was fined $500. I think the embarrassment was enough punishment alone, though. On February 1st, 2009, viewers in parts of Arizona tuning into the Super Bowl got a very unexpected surprise. During the fourth quarter of the game between the Arizona Cardinals and the Pittsburgh Steelers, the feed from NBC affiliate KVOA suddenly cut out, and for about 28 seconds, people saw explicit footage from the adult video Wild Cherries 5 instead of the game. Viewers across Tucson were stunned and horrified, watching what should have been the biggest football game of the year replaced with something, less family friendly. At first, Comcast, which delivered the signal to local cable systems, said this looked like a deliberate hijack and promised a full investigation. KVOA launched its own investigation as well. For a while, nobody knew who was responsible, though. It wasn't until February 4th, 2011, more than 2 years later, that police arrested 38-year-old Frank Tenori Gonzalez, a former Cox Cable employee from Arizona. Gonzalez eventually pleaded guilty to 2 counts of computer tampering. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and had to pay a $1,000 fine to the Arizona Attorney General's anti-racketeering fund. In April 2002, Venezuela was in chaos. Protests were happening all over the country, with clashes between supporters of President Hugo Chavez and the opposition. TV became a big part of the fight, with both sides trying to control what people saw. On April 12th, opposition-aligned military forces took over the state-owned channel VTV. The station went off the air, and anyone watching only saw cartoons or old movies instead of news. So the pro-Chavez side was completely cut off. At the same time, private channels were pushing the opposition. They showed anti-Chavez marches and urged the people to join the demonstrations. Pro-Chavez rallies barely got any coverage, creating a blackout for his supporters. Disruption lasted less than 2 days. Chavez supporters took back VTV and the presidential palace, regular broadcasts returned, and the president was back in power. In September 2012, a North Carolina family was watching Lilo and Stitch on their TV when something completely unexpected happened. About a minute into the movie, the picture pixelated, and for around 6 minutes the movie disappeared, replaced with much more adult footage before normal programming returned. The mom, Georgie Brown, says she first heard sounds coming from the living room that clearly did not belong in a family cartoon. And when she ran in, they were terrified, one screaming and covering his ears, another in tears. Brown had recorded the movie a few days earlier and played it back for her 3 children. They hadn't touched the remote or changed the channel. Instead, the 6 minutes of adult material appeared right in the middle of her recorded movie, between messages saying part of the program was lost due to signal issues. A Dish Network contractor who looked at Brown's receiver said he'd never seen anything like it in his 15 years in the TV business. And Dish said they were taking the incident seriously and investigating what went wrong. During a live morning broadcast in Honduras, journalist Carlos Molina was on air with co-host Pablo Zapata. They were just reading viewer messages at the desk, pretty standard TV morning show stuff. Then mid-sentence, Carlos just stops. It's right in front of him, a glass of water on the table starts sliding across on its own. Not a tiny shake either. It actually moves clearly enough that both presenters, they notice it. And after the segment hit the air, the clip started getting shared around online, and Carlos said that something strange actually happened before the glass even moved. He described feeling a sudden chill run through his body right before it started sliding. He also made it clear nobody on the crew was messing around. Of course, glasses will sometimes slide when there's condensation underneath, but that doesn't appear to be the case here. The movement looks a lot more purposeful. It's not a subtle little slide, but what do you all think of this one? In March 2015, Coco 5 News in Oklahoma City was doing a pretty standard early morning traffic segment when their Skycam captured something flashing across the screen. A bright white object suddenly streaks through the frame at insane speed. The anchors didn't react in real time because it happened so fast, but viewers noticed it immediately. And once the footage got out, people started flooding the station asking what they just saw, and Coco took it seriously. They replayed the clip and then posted it online asking viewers to help figure out what it could be. It's too fast and too straight to be a plane. It doesn't match drone movement either, and it doesn't really drop like a meteor would. It cuts across the frame more like it's traveling sideways at a steady height. People also ruled out simple camera bugs or something on the lens because the light appears to pass behind distant clouds instead of just sitting on the glass. It also didn't line up with any known aircraft activity or scheduled flights in the area at the time. This one comes from a Reddit user named Amputee Hand Model, responding to a thread about strange broadcast interruptions. They wrote, "A somewhat odd one I witnessed 20 years ago or so. One of those emergency broadcast tests came on TV, but instead of the usual audio with the test warning script, it just played Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard. I gotta wonder what the emergency was, because, hopefully it wasn't serious. Anyone actually waiting for instructions on what to do was out of luck that day." In 2010, a Jamaican news station covered a story about a young boy who said he was being haunted by something called a duppy, which is basically a local word for a ghost. The crew records him talking about it while sitting in a chair, describing strange experiences and the feeling of some ominous presence around him. Suddenly, he gets pulled backward in his chair. Doesn't look like a slip or, him pushing off the ground. He goes back fast. Something yanks him out of position. Later in the segment, things escalate again. He says he can actually see the spirit standing nearby, watching him. Right after that, he gets pulled backward again, similar to before, still fully in frame while it happens. And look how his body moves. One of his legs lifts into the air as he's sliding backward. Then when his mother rushes in and grabs him, his leg twists as she pulls him forward, like there's resistance or something interfering with his movement, even though you can't actually see anything on camera. It's a pretty crazy video. In April of 2020, during the early lockdowns, Pope Francis appeared at a window overlooking St. Peter's Square in Vatican City to give a blessing. It was part of a live broadcast. He steps out, acknowledges the crowd, delivers the blessing, and then turns to head back inside. But this clip ended up going viral, and not for the reason that you're probably thinking. Some viewers noticed that as he walked away from the window, he suddenly just disappeared. One moment he was there, and the next frame he was gone. The clip started circulating online with people claiming that he disappeared into thin air during the live broadcast. Ending on a spooky note, in 2015, CNN reporter Katie Kairos and her cameraman Nick Petrillo went to a house in Hanover, Pennsylvania, to film a segment about a woman named Deanna Simpson who said that her home was haunted. Deanna claimed she'd been dealing with it for about 7 years. She said it wasn't just strange noises. According to her, she'd been attacked by whatever was in the house, along with her husband and their pets. She also said she heard voices and screaming at night when nobody else was around. Well, while they were filming, things did start getting weird. Nick, the cameraman, suddenly said his hand felt like it was burning. When he checked it, there were fresh scratch marks on his wrist. Deanna didn't react like it was new information. She told him, "It's because you're telling the story. They don't want it out there. That's their way of a warning." And then she sprinkled holy water on him. Katie Kairos later said she also felt something during the filming, describing it like being touched, pinched, while they were inside the house. At one point, they even caught small orb-like shapes on camera. And after Deanna asked whatever was there to show itself, a door reportedly slammed shut on its own. Deanna said she had recordings too, including what sounded like children laughing when the house was supposedly empty. On March 11th, 2016, people in Israel watching Big Brother on Channel 2 got a jarring surprise. For about 3.5 minutes, the broadcast was taken over by Hamas. Viewers with private satellite dishes saw images from past attacks, funeral footage, and messages in Hebrew and Arabic saying things like, "Learn from history and the story is not over." Not everyone was affected. Homes using regular cable or major satellite providers didn't see it. Almost at the same time, though, rockets were fired from Gaza into southern Israel, though luckily no one was hurt. The timing seemed to suggest, though, that the TV takeover and the attacks were connected. Israeli authorities quickly traced this back to Hamas, and the incident made headlines around the country. On April 20th, 2012, viewers in and around Hamilton, Ontario, watching News Now AM, were met with 3 minutes of, you guessed it, an adult film. This really seems to happen a lot, doesn't it? The station's news director said the issue happened because of a mix-up at one of the cable companies. Cable lines had been cut the night before, and while crews were repairing them that morning, the wrong programming was somehow spliced into the cable feed that carried the channel's signal to subscribers. In early March 2022, as Russia's invasion of Ukraine entered its second week, the collective of hackers known as Anonymous claimed that they breached a bunch of Russian state-run TV channels, streaming services, and interrupted their broadcasts, with footage showing the impacts of the war. Russia 24, Channel 1, Moscow 24, and streaming platforms like Wink and Ivy were affected. Instead of the official state news feed, viewers saw clips of the conflict in Ukraine, along with messages in support of ending the war. In some of the footage, ending text claimed that ordinary Russians were against the war and urged opposition to the invasion. Anonymous had publicly declared it was in a kind of digital offensive against the Russian government after the invasion started. On the evening of April 8, 2015, something big went down at French broadcaster TV5 Monde. The main TV signal, all 12 of its channels, went black while the network was celebrating the launch of a new channel. Screens went totally dark, and the station's websites and social accounts were taken over as well. Yves Bigot, the director general, later said it was the worst thing that can happen to you in television. At first, posts and messages claiming responsibility came from a group calling itself Cyber Caliphate. The broadcaster's Facebook page was defaced, and the hackers posted threats like, "The Cyber Caliphate continues its cyber jihad against the enemies of Islamic State." Inside the network, things were a mess. Signals stayed down for hours, staff couldn't use email, and TV5 had to broadcast only pre-recorded programs. One of the technicians on site finally isolated the infected machine by unplugging it, and the channel started coming back on early the next morning. The hackers had broken into TV5 Monde systems months earlier, learned how their broadcast setups worked, and then created custom software to cripple their network. And it turned out that it was a well-known Russian hacking group known as APT-28, rather than the original claim of Islamic State hackers. But why TV5 was targeted is still unclear, but the attack took TV5 offline for over 18 hours and cost millions in repairs and security upgrades. On the evening of July 29, 2025, something weird happened during a live broadcast from Brazilian channel Record News on YouTube. The live feed abruptly stopped showing the news and was replaced with a low-resolution video full of distorted visuals and odd noises, along with cryptic messages and phrases like, "You will see such pretty things. Why do you hate? And you are ill." It looked like some sort of mind control message you'd see in a movie. The interruption lasted about 3 minutes. Record News confirmed the issue only affected the YouTube stream. The regular TV broadcast and pay TV signals were not impacted here, but those phrases were the same lines found in a well-known internet creepypasta called the Wyoming Incident, a creepy fictional broadcast intrusion that's been circulating online since at least 2006. In 2005, ABC 13 Action News in Las Vegas covered a man named Ramon Watkins, who referred to himself as Prophet Yahweh. He claimed that he could summon UFOs just by praying, and said he would prove it live on camera. Well, ABC sent a reporter, Mike Dello Stritto, and a cameraman to meet him near Lake Mead. The prophet prayed, and within moments, something strange appeared in the sky. It was two bright spherical objects hovering and slowly moving in the distance. The cameraman caught them clearly on video as they floated across the sky. The footage aired live, and people who were watching could see it happen in real time. This wasn't a quick flash or something easily dismissed. It stayed visible long enough for everyone to focus on it. Prophet Yahweh said he heard a voice in his head telling him when the UFOs would appear and where to look. But was this really the case? I mean, that is obviously very hard to believe. Could the objects have been balloons, drones, aircraft? Maybe, but they didn't seem to move like any of those things. The ABC crew didn't offer an explanation, and the event still gets passed around online with no solid answer for what actually showed up in the sky that day. On August 5th, 2009, during a live morning news broadcast on BBC Northeast, anchor Colin Briggs was delivering the day's stories when something strange appeared on the screen behind him. It was this wide shot of the Millennium Bridge in Newcastle, coming from the BBC's live webcam feed. Suddenly, this white streak of light zips across the frame, not falling downward, but shooting further into the sky before disappearing. The object was fast moving, but clear enough that viewers noticed, and people started recording it from their televisions and quickly shared the clips online. Some said it was a bird, a toy plane, but it doesn't really look like either of those things to me, and it didn't to Nick Pope, who is a former UK Ministry of Defence UFO investigator. He reviewed the slowdown footage and said it didn't look like a bird and that the movement was genuinely strange. The BBC later did a follow-up asking for viewer opinions, but never provided a final answer or any definitive explanation for what happened. On February 11th, 2013, during an afternoon broadcast on KRTV in Great Falls, Montana, during an episode of the Steve Wilkos Show, the emergency alert system suddenly cut in. Thank God, everyone said. Why was I watching the Steve Wilkos Show? Suddenly, though, viewers heard this voice calmly announce that the, quote, bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living.
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living.
The message warned people not to approach these zombies and to wait for further instructions. It sounded pretty official and used the same tones and format as real emergency alerts. Within hours, similar hoax messages interrupted TV stations in Michigan, Wisconsin, and New Mexico. Even more strange, 2 days later, a radio station in La Crosse, Wisconsin played a recording of the hoax alert and accidentally triggered the EAS again, rebroadcasting the zombie warning to viewers who thought it was happening all over again. Investigators later confirmed that hackers had exploited a weak security on the emergency broadcast equipment, in many cases using default passwords that were still active. The hackers were eventually caught, but as for how exactly they did this, that's never been disclosed, probably for obvious reasons. On January 3rd, 2007, people in Australia were watching Mayday Head-On Collision, a documentary about air travel disasters, when something very weird happened. In the middle of the broadcast on Channel 7, the original audio suddenly cut out and was replaced with a looping clip from an old news story about a Halliburton convoy ambush.
Lord, Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord. Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord.
The audio was just a truck driver named Preston Wheeler screaming, "Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord," over and over. The audio kept repeating that same line for 5 solid minutes while the visuals from the documentary kept playing. Nobody knew how this happened. One viewer said he kept calling the station while it was happening, but no one answered the phones. There was no follow-up, no investigation. Channel 7 just brushed it off and moved on. This one is very eerie, though. In 1964, during a high-stakes soccer match in Peru, a massive crowd gathered to watch their team play Argentina. Near the end of the game, the referee made a call that the local fans hated, and 2 people hopped the fence to run onto the field. The police on the scene beat the fans in front of everyone, and this caused the rest of the stadium to erupt in anger. To try and control the situation, the police fired tear gas into the stands, and that was a big mistake. The gas caused thousands of people to just panic and rush toward the exit gates to escape the fumes. Problem was, the steel gates at the bottom of the tunnels were locked. Because the people at the back of the crowd couldn't see what was happening at the front, they just kept pushing forward, and over 300 people were crushed. suffocated against the locked doors. Outside the stadium, the rioting grew so intense, the government had to declare a state of emergency. It remains the deadliest day in the history of the sport. In 2011, a crowd of about 12,000 people had gathered for a concert on a hot summer night. The weather was getting worse and a massive storm was moving in. Just as an announcer told the crowd that a storm was coming, but that they hoped the show would go on, a huge gust of wind, measured at nearly 70 miles per hour, hit the massive steel stage, holding thousands of pounds of lights and speakers, and in a few seconds, the entire rigging started to lean forward. Fans caught the whole thing on their phones as the steel beams groaned and then completely gave way, crashing down onto the people standing in the front row. 7 people lost their lives, and dozens more were trapped under the heavy metal. It's incredibly disturbing and sad how quickly the atmosphere changed from this fun night out to just total destruction. In May of 1985, the European Cup final was held at Heysel Stadium in Brussels, Belgium. The stadium was a bit of a dump. The concrete was crumbling and security was a mess. The organizers had put a group of neutral Belgian fans in Section Z right next to the most hardcore Liverpool supporters, with only a thin wire fence separating them. Well, about an hour before kickoff, the tension snapped, and Liverpool fans started throwing stones over the fence, and then they charged. The people in Section Z were just families and regular fans who had nowhere to go. They ran toward a concrete perimeter wall at the edge of the section to get away from the chaos. And the sheer weight of hundreds of people being pushed and crushed against the wall was too much for the old building. The concrete finally gave way and collapsed on top of them. 39 people died and hundreds more were hurt. And the most disturbing part is what happened next. Even though bodies were being carried out on pieces of fencing used as makeshift stretchers, the game went on. They were terrified that if they canceled it, the riots would burn down the city. So the players went out and played the full 90 minutes with dead bodies lying just outside the stadium walls. This is one of the most frightening examples of how a small mistake can lead to a massive disaster. In 2003, a rock band called Great White was performing at a small club in Rhode Island. As part of their opening, they used gerbs, which are small fireworks that shoot sparks into the air. The club had covered the walls in cheap acoustic foam to keep the noise down though, and that foam was highly flammable. So within seconds, the sparks ignited the walls. At first, the crowd thought that the flames were just part of the show, but it only took about 30 seconds for them to realize the building was actually on fire. Everyone rushed to the front door at the same time, creating a bottleneck. The club became a smoke-filled trap in less than 2 minutes. 100 people didn't make it out, and this entire sequence of events was captured on camera. It is not an easy watch, but it does go to show just how dangerous these situations are, how easily fires can become deadly, especially in crowded places. In 1989, during a big soccer game in England, a massive number of fans were trying to get into the stadium all at once. To ease the pressure at the turnstiles, a police officer ordered a large exit gate to be opened. This allowed thousands of people to pour into a tunnel that led directly to 2 already overcrowded pens, which were fenced-in areas for standing fans. The people entering the tunnel had no idea the area was full, so they kept pushing forward. The fans at the very front were crushed against the high steel fences that were meant to keep them off the field. Because the game had already started, the noise of the crowd drowned out the screams, drowned out all the screaming for help. It took several minutes for security to realize that people were being crushed. 97 people died in the end. For years, the authorities tried to blame the fans for what happened, but a long investigation eventually proved that, well, this is just actually a massive failure in stadium safety. There's one thing I've learned doing this list though, I'm never going to a soccer match, I don't think, especially not in Europe. The National Championship air races in Nevada are famous for planes flying at high speeds just a few dozen feet above the ground. Well, in 2011, a highly modified vintage fighter plane called the Galloping Ghost was competing. As the pilot, 74-year-old Jimmy Leeward, rounded a turn, a small piece of the tail broke off. This caused the plane to experience an incredible amount of G-force, which likely knocked the pilot unconscious. The plane pitched up, then dove straight down, traveling at over 400 miles per hour. It slammed directly into the concrete in front of the VIP grandstands. Because of the speed, there was no explosion. The plane basically disintegrated on impact, sending shrapnel through the seating area. 11 people were killed, including the pilot, of course. Now, there is footage of this, and it is absolutely terrifying to watch just how fast this happened. Nobody had time to even duck. It happened in an instant. On October 2nd, 2014, Colette Provencher was delivering a live weather report on TVA News from the rooftop of the network's building in Montreal. As she talked, a bright green orb floated across the sky behind her. She didn't notice anything at the time, but viewers definitely did. The footage spread online, and people started arguing about what the glowing object actually was. Some said it was just a meteor. Others pointed out that the object looked way too big and wasn't moving like a typical shooting star. It also seemed to slow down mid-flight, which doesn't make sense for a meteor. The orb stayed visible for several seconds and didn't burn out like you'd expect. What are we looking at here? Good question. This clip was posted to Reddit by user Steve 90,000, who wrote that on December 13th, 2024 at 5 p.m., ABC News caught an orb on video when in New Jersey investigating the drone situation. At the time, tons of people were spotting UAPs over the state. So what you're looking at here is just one of them. As for what it actually was, we still don't know. On April 27th, 1986, HBO viewers were watching The Falcon and the Snowman when their screens suddenly cut to black, and for about 5 minutes, a message appeared in bright white text on a color test pattern that read, "Good evening, HBO, from Captain Midnight. $12.95 a month? No way." The broadcast had been hijacked. The person behind it was John R. McDougall, a satellite engineer who was frustrated with HBO's pricing, which he felt was unfair to satellite dish owners who had to pay monthly fees for content that used to be free. McDougall later admitted that he'd used his own satellite equipment at a Florida transmission site to briefly override HBO's signal. He knew exactly how to aim his dish and transmit at just the right frequency to cut into their feed. Authorities launched an investigation, and within a few months, he was caught. He was fined and given probation, so yeah, the guy was identified, but I just had to bring this one up. The fact that this guy successfully interrupted one of the largest cable networks without immediate detection is pretty nuts. This is one of the most high-profile broadcast intrusions in US history. In 2021, Sam Hessler, a reporter for CBS 6, was doing a live morning segment from Greenbridge Cemetery in Saratoga County, New York. At the time, everything seemed perfectly normal. Nobody on set noticed anything unusual. It wasn't until later that day when a viewer contacted the station saying they'd seen something strange walking behind her during the broadcast. When the news team went back to review the footage, they spotted it too. Some sort of figure crossing the background. It almost looked like it appeared out of nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. The clip got passed around and people slowed it down to try and figure out what it was. In the slowed version, you can clearly see a shadowy form moving across the screen. Now, Greenridge Cemetery already has a bit of a spooky reputation. There have been stories of eerie things there over the years. You can imagine the details. Nothing super out of the ordinary for a cemetery. But to have something captured on live television like this, that hits a little different. The Reptilian conspiracy is one of the more out there theories floating around, but somehow it's got a pretty big following, partly thanks to supposed footage of it. The idea is that some of the world's most powerful people, your politicians, singers, actors, that they're not actually human, that they're instead these shape-shifting reptilian creatures wearing human skin suits as a disguise while secretly pulling the strings behind all the world's biggest decisions. What's kept this conspiracy alive for so long is what some claim to be video evidence. Over the years, live TV has supposedly caught these lizard people slipping up. There are clips of news anchors and politicians where their pupils briefly look like vertical slits instead of round human eyes. Sometimes their faces seem to glitch, momentarily revealing what looks like snake-like patches of skin underneath. Plenty of people have slowed these clips down, zoomed in, and picked apart the footage frame by frame, and then posted top 10 lists online talking about it. Well, I gotta talk about it. I know it, you know it, but that's because this is the wildest live broadcast hack in history, the Max Headroom incident, still unsolved. On November 22nd, 1987, on the evening news on WGN in Chicago, the screen suddenly cut to a man wearing a Max Headroom mask, a character from a TV show around that time. The man didn't say anything at first, he just stood there as this background behind him was spinning around, making strange movements, and you also heard a bit of a buzzing noise. The station quickly cut the feed, got back to the news. It only lasted about 20 seconds, but that wasn't the end of it. Just 2 hours later, during a broadcast of Doctor Who on the local PBS station, the same masked man took over again, and this time he started talking, mumbling phrases that made no sense, mocking TV personalities, even getting spanked with a fly swatter by someone off camera. It's a mix of emotions watching this footage. It's undoubtedly eerie, but you can't say there isn't humor in this too. The whole thing lasted about 90 seconds before the station finally managed to cut him off. The Federal Communications Commission launched an investigation, but they never caught the person responsible. To this day, no one knows who did it or exactly how they pulled it off. Why even? Breaking into live broadcasts like this is not easy. It would have required a lot of knowledge and skill. It's considered one of the weirdest unsolved broadcast intrusions ever.
In our number 10 spot, we have the Queen of England. Okay, your girl is British, and being so, us Brits just have a soft spot for the Queen, but apparently the rest of the world doesn't, and everybody seemingly thinks she's a shapeshifter reptilian hybrid. So that was news to me. Not only just the Queen, but a lot of people speculate over the entire royal family being reptilian hybrids. The reason being due to some footage that surfaced online that showcased the Queen being dressed in one of her cute outfits. But then all of a sudden, they zoom in on her eye and you see her eye looking completely creepy. Honestly, the footage is terrifying, and I've watched enough horror movies in my life to recognize a demon when I see one, and her eye looked just a tad bit demon-like. Apparently people have said that her eye was just bloodshot. But yeah, I don't know about that excuse. They really should have said that she had some kind of eye disease, because that I would believe. I've had a bloodshot, probably at least plus 10 times in my life, and I've seen bloodshot eyes several times, and never have I ever seen anything that looks like that. Her entire eye is bloody looking. Honestly, it's as if perhaps someone punched her in the eye, except there's no swelling. It's very strange. So anyways, I see why people think she's possibly a shapeshifter. In our number 9 spot, we have Katy Perry. Okay, this is some crazy footage, y'all. I have obviously heard of the theory that celebs are really just reptiles, but like, damn, Katy Perry? I love her. I don't want to believe it. You can't make me. Okay, but for real, even if she is a shapeshifter reptilian, is it possible that she's not a bad one? I say yes. Anyways, in this clip we see Katy Perry's eye shift from blue to green, and her pupils become slits for a second before she seemingly notices and looks away from the camera. Very sus, Katy. In our number 8 spot, we have Dove Cameron. Dove Cameron is an actress and extremely talented singer, most notably known for her Disney Channel show Liv and Maddie and The Descendants. Her voice is angelic, and personally, I'm a big fan. But regardless of my feelings, people speculate that she is a shapeshifter, or that a shapeshifter has taken over her body. One or the other. There is some recent footage of her doing an interview on the red carpet, and in this interview she has a moment where it seems as if she shifts a little. When you zoom into her eyes, it appears as if for a second her eyes reveal her pupils suddenly turning into a slit, just for a second, before turning back. It's really quite fast, but if you slow down the footage and zoom in closely, you can see it clear as day. So perhaps she has something weird going on with her eye, or perhaps she's actually a shapeshifter. Probably the latter. In our number 7 spot, we have Beyonce. Many are very suspicious of Beyonce apparently, and I had no idea. Apparently she is one of the most suspicious of the Hollywood celebs that people are pretty certain certain is a shapeshifter reptile, and it's because of a few different shots of her that reveal some pretty wild things. Apparently in one shot you see Beyonce singing, and suddenly the side of her face almost looks scaly. In another shot, Beyonce is dancing on stage and whipping her hair around, and for a millisecond you can literally see her face transform into a demon. I'm not joking, it's terrifying. And it's probably real. It's hard to believe her heavenly voice is even human, so most likely she's from out of this world. What do you think? Leave a comment in the comment section below.
Back in 2016, a Thai model named Thipawan, who also goes by Pui, went on a morning talk show and claimed she'd been possessed by a spirit for over a year. She said it was a pop, which in Thai folklore is basically a ghost that feeds on human organs. As you can imagine, this makes for an awkward guest. At first she was pretty calm, just explaining how she picked up the spirit while on a trip to Rayong, but halfway through the interview, something changes. Her voice, her mannerisms. She starts talking like she's not the one in control anymore, and the hosts quickly realize that something's wrong. The pop has taken over. They start trying to reason with the spirit, telling it to stop threatening people. Then one of the hosts pulls out a Buddha pendant. As soon as he holds it up, Pui completely loses it. She screams, flails, and recoils like someone threw acid at her. They end up putting the pendant around her neck, and then it just stops, like nothing happened. Shame she didn't think to do that before spending the year with an angry demon in her body. The whole thing went viral in Thailand. It's definitely one of the wildest things ever broadcast on Thai TV. That I know of. I don't watch Thai TV. In 1971, NBC aired something that had never really been done before on TV, an exorcism. Most audiences back then didn't even know what an exorcism was. I mean, sure, exorcisms had been around for a very long time, but they hadn't seeped into pop culture the way they have now. This was still 2 years before The Exorcist even came out, so to say audiences were shocked by this would be an understatement. The 6-minute segment documented the experiences of Edwin and Marcia Becker, a couple living in Chicago who claimed their home was haunted. Reporter Carol Simpson led the piece, which opened with an interview where the Beckers described unexplained activity in the house.
Cabinet doors were closing, doors were opening, doors were closing.
This past week, they said they were awakened by the sound of a woman crying. It came from the dining room, but there was no one in the house but themselves.
I hated to think of what it was, Edwin went on to say during the interview. After the Catholic Church declined to help them, the Beckers contacted the independent spiritualist church in Chicago. The exorcism was performed by Reverend William Darrell Davis and Joseph DeLuise, a medium. Everyone in the house, including the news crew, was asked to wear crucifixes for protection. At one point, Reverend DeLuise entered a trance and claimed to channel the voice of a spirit, an old woman who spoke through him, saying something about a lock combination.
Remember, the combination. Why did it concern you? It's important to me. Why did you stay here?
During the ritual, a strong gust of wind blew through the room, shaking the blinds, although that apparently happened off camera. The team also used a mirror, offered communion to the spirit, and spread blessed salt throughout the house. The broadcast ended with Simpson stating that the house had been quiet for several days since. In 2005, Channel 4 in the UK aired a show called The Exorcism, where they attempted a real exorcism on live television. A lot of viewers found it highly disturbing. The subject was a man named Colin, though, who claimed he was possessed by something that lived in his right foot. Apparently this demonic foot spirit caused him to drive dangerously fast without being able to stop himself. That sounds like one of the worst excuses in court, but anyway, he tried everything else apparently, so Channel 4 decided to televise the exorcism to see if it would help. The network made a big deal out of this, calling it a scientific experiment and even bringing in psychiatrists and of course church officials to answer phones afterward in case viewers got freaked out. And they did. Over 4,000 people called in after the broadcast. It ended up being one of Channel 4's most called about shows. During the actual exorcism, Colin didn't exactly start levitating or vomiting pea soup, but he did look tense and disturbed. And then after a bunch of prayers, he suddenly said, "That was the most relaxed deliverance I've ever had." So take from that what you will. If anyone has more information on this airing though, like if you actually saw it live, please share your thoughts down in the comments. Back in the early 90s, ABC's 2020 aired a segment that freaked a lot of people out as well. It featured a teenage girl named Gina being exorcised by a group of Pentecostal ministers. It was filmed and broadcast nationwide in 1991 for millions to see. The footage is pretty distressing. Gina was clearly not in a good way, eyes rolling, voice growling, body convulsing. She screams, jerks violently, and starts shouting things in this deep, raspy voice. According to the ministers, she was possessed by several entities, two of which were named Zion and Minga. Ministers surrounded her, prayed, and yelled for the entities to come out. Eventually, everything settles down and the demons are supposedly exorcised. Whether you believe in this or not, the footage is kinda disturbing. From what I can tell, this was not a staged segment. Even if it was just emotional overload or religious hysteria, it's sad watching a young girl go through something like this, all in front of cameras too. There's never been an update on Gina either. She ended up in psychiatric care soon after this segment aired. As for what she's up to now, if she's okay, we don't know. On August 19th, 1987, a man named Gary Stolman managed to get inside NBC's Burbank studio during the 4 p.m. news. At one point during the broadcast, he walked up behind reporter David Horowitz, pulled out a firearm, and forced him to read a bizarre statement live on air.
What is this? Let me see what it says.
Now, to say Gary Stolman was possessed here is a stretch, but he was in this eerily calm state considering the circumstances. He's almost robotic. It's very odd, and to the reporter's credit, he stayed pretty calm too, way more than I would have. He just started reading the paper, which was filled with wild claims about the CIA, mind control, and mental hospitals.
In 1981, by someone with connections at the CIA.
After the manifesto was read, Stolman just casually placed the firearm on the desk. Anchor John Beard quickly grabbed it, and security took Stolman into custody. Turns out, it wasn't even a real firearm. It was an unloaded BB. Very strange incident though. During a live call-in show on an Islamic TV channel, the hosts were doing a regular Q&A session when a woman called in saying she believed people had used black magic on her, and that a jinn, which is a type of supernatural being in Islamic belief, had possessed her. She said she'd been trying to fight it off with constant prayer, but it didn't seem to be working. At first she sounds calm, clearly distressed, but calm, and then it takes a turn. She starts making these weird animalistic noises, low growling, almost inhuman, and then a bit later, she just breaks into this loud manic laughter that comes out of nowhere. It's the kind of laughter that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. Now, whether this woman was actually possessed or not, who really knows? She was definitely dealing with something though, unless she was faking the whole thing, but it doesn't really matter. The call is freaky either way. David Blaine's 2001 interview on GMTV is incredibly strange, so much so that it's kinda hard to watch, and if you were a super sheltered person who was genuinely freaked out by magicians and you tuned into this interview, you'd probably think David Blaine was possessed by some dark force that allowed him to perform his insane stunts and tricks. So Blaine came on the show to promote one of his stunts, but instead of answering questions like a normal person, he mostly just sat there silently staring. He barely blinked, barely moved.
I'm sure you're not going to tell me. Indeed.
And when he did speak, it was in this deep, monotone kind of drawl, and his answers were short. The host tried everything to break through, asked him normal stuff, asked him weirder stuff, even straight up said at one point, "Is this just part of the show?" Blaine didn't flinch, finally lifted his hand and showed an eye drawn on his palm, explaining in a flat, muffled tone, "It's protection from death."
Protection from death. Oh.
The interviewer later said it was one of the most awkward interviews of his career, and go figure. This clip is from a BBC documentary filmed in 1978, part of one of the most well-known paranormal cases ever, the Enfield poltergeist. A reporter named Rosalind Morris visited the Hodgson family in Enfield, London, and interviewed them multiple times. This clip shows Janet Hodgson, who was just a kid at the time, speaking in this deep, harsh voice she claimed belonged to a spirit named Bill.
No. Who's there?
The Hodgins said it started small. They'd hear knocking sounds, furniture would move around by itself, but then things started to get out of hand. Objects started flying across the room. Janet and her sister Margaret would get yanked out of bed. Janet started speaking in that raspy voice. Eventually, famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren showed up, and they backed the family up, saying the house was haunted by a poltergeist. Alright, one of the most uncomfortable and frustrating interviews I've ever seen is this Jim Carrey one. Oof. Now again, possessed in the traditional sense, no, but was he in some kind of state? Definitely. And it's hard to watch. It's very, very weird. So during a red carpet event at New York Fashion Week in 2017, Kat Sadler from E! News was trying to, just do her job. Have a normal chat with Jim Carrey, who seemed to just be going out of his way to make things uncomfortable. There's no meaning to any of this, he said. I wanted to find the most meaningless thing that I could come to and join, and here I am. Sadler tried to keep things on track, mentioning that the party was celebrating icons, and then he's like, I don't believe in icons, I don't believe in personalities, I believe that peace lies beyond personalities, beyond invention and disguise, beyond the red S you wear on your chest that makes bullets bounce off. And to really drive the existential dread home, he finishes off with, this world is not our world, we don't matter. Okay, it's so pretentious. It's like a teenager who just had their first philosophy class and suddenly thinks they're just so above it all. I know the truth, I see everything for what it really is. I don't know what Jim Carrey was going through at this point, but I think luckily he's become a bit more normal again, I think. I don't know. In 2012, a woman named Latoya Amons in Gary, Indiana claimed her house was infested with demons. She said her kids were getting possessed. One kid apparently levitated, another walked backwards up a hospital wall. And it wasn't just her saying these things. Multiple people, like doctors, nurses, police officers, DCS workers, claimed they saw really weird things happen. The case ended up getting so much attention that it reached the local police and the church, and that's when a priest named Father Michael Maginot performed multiple exorcisms, one of which was reportedly sanctioned by the Catholic Church itself. Zach Baggins from Ghost Adventures eventually bought the house and made a whole documentary about it called Demon House. He claimed the place was so dangerous, he had to demolish it. Le Mans is the most famous endurance race in the world, but in 1955 it became the site of a disaster that changed racing forever. Early in the race, a driver named Mike Hawthorne slowed down suddenly to enter the pits. This caused a chain reaction behind him. Another driver, Pierre Levey, was traveling at 150 miles per hour and had nowhere to go. His car hit the back of a slower vehicle, which acted like a ramp, launching him directly into the air toward the spectator stands. The car didn't just crash, it basically disintegrated. The heavy engine block, the radiator, and the hood flew through the air like projectiles, cutting through the crowd, burst into white-hot flames that were almost impossible for firefighters to put out with water. 83 people lost their lives that day. The most unsettling part of the story is that the race organizers decided not to stop the event. While bodies were being carried away, the remaining drivers continued to lap the track for another 12 hours. But they weren't being heartless. If they stopped the race, all the people leaving the venue at once would have clogged the roads, preventing ambulances from reaching the victims. The Wallendas were, and still are, circus royalty, famous for performing incredibly dangerous stunts without a safety net. Their 7-person chair pyramid was their most legendary act. It involved 4 men on the wire, 2 men on the level above them, and a woman at the very top sitting in a chair. During a performance at the Shrine Circus in Detroit in 1962, the group was in the middle of their act when the lead man on the wire suddenly lost his balance. The pole slipped and the entire pyramid collapsed in an instant. Thousands of families watched as the performers plummeted toward the concrete floor. 2 members of the family died on impact, and another was paralyzed from the waist down. The woman at the very top, Jenna Walenda, managed to grab the wire as she fell and was caught by circus staff below. Even though the arena was filled with screaming and panic, the circus band was instructed to keep playing to try and calm the crowd. In the move that many found hard to believe, the surviving members of the family were back on the high wire, performing again the very next evening. It's old school, show must go on mentality. The marathon at the 1904 St. Louis Olympics has to be one of the most insane, disastrous sporting events in history. It was held in 90-degree heat on roads that were thick with dust. And to make matters worse, the organizers only provided 2 water stops for the entire 26-mile course because they wanted to see how it would affect the runners. It was basically an experiment. Well, as you can imagine, the result was pure chaos. But it wasn't even entirely to do with dehydration. One runner was chased a mile off the course by a pack of wild dogs. Another runner nearly lost his life because the dust he inhaled caused his stomach lining to tear. The man who crossed the finish line first, Fred Lors, actually cheated by riding a car for 11 miles. So the real winner, a man named Thomas Hicks, well, he somehow managed to make it, with his trainers feeding him a mixture of egg whites, brandy, and a type of rat poison. At the time, they thought small doses of it acted as a stimulant. By the final miles, Hicks was hallucinating. His skin had turned gray, and he had to be physically carried over the finish line by his team. He lost 8 pounds during the race and nearly died in the medical tent afterward. Good God, somebody needs to make a movie about this. In the early 90s, Monica Seles was the top female tennis player in the world. During a match in Germany in 1993, she was sitting on a bench during a break between games, wiping her face with a towel. The crowd was quiet, they were just waiting for the next set to start. A graphic showed up on screen with the score for people watching at home, like usual, and then suddenly a scream ran out. A man named Gunter Parch had run down from the stands. Before anyone could react, he plunged a 9-inch blade into Seles's back between her shoulder blades. The stadium went from dead silent to absolute panic as security tackled the man. Seles stood up, clutching her back, and then collapsed into the arms of the staff. Turns out the attacker was not really a random person. He was an obsessed fan of Seles's rival, Steffi Graf. Apparently, he didn't want to end her life, he just wanted to hurt her so she couldn't play tennis anymore, allowing Graf to become #1 again. Even though the wound healed in a few weeks, the mental impact lasted for years. Seles didn't return to professional tennis for 2 years, and the event forced every major sport to completely change how they handle security around athletes during live events. On October 8th, 2022, something shocking happened during a live news broadcast on Iran's state-run television. In the middle of the program, the feed suddenly cut away to a masked figure, then to a black screen showing a politician surrounded by flames, with a digital target placed directly over his head. This lasted for about 12 seconds. The screen also displayed photos of 4 women who'd recently died during protests. Alongside the image was the phrase "Woman, Life, Freedom," repeated multiple times. The group responsible for the interruption identified themselves as Adalat Ali, a hacktivist collective already known for leaking internal Iranian government documents before this incident. Clips of the hijacking spread almost instantly, both inside and outside Iran. This next story is a first-hand account from a now-deleted Reddit user who wrote, "This has bugged me for years, and I'm honestly starting to wonder if I somehow imagined it. I grew up in southern Ohio, near the Cincinnati area, and this would have been sometime around 2003 or 2004. I was maybe 12 or 13. It was a school night, probably around 9 or 10 p.m., and I was watching TV alone in my room. I don't remember the exact channel. It might have been a local station or basic cable. I know it wasn't a premium channel. I wasn't really paying attention much to what was on. I usually use the TV to fall asleep, but I noticed when this happened. Out of nowhere, the show cut to a black screen, then this grainy video fades in. It looked like security camera footage or maybe a camcorder pointed at a TV. There was a man sitting in a chair, facing away from the camera. You couldn't see his face. He just sat there while this low humming noise played. After maybe 20 or 30 seconds, he slowly turned his head toward the camera, but the video cut out before you could really see him. Then the screen went blue for a second and the normal show came back on, like usual. The next morning, I kind of wondered if I'd just been half asleep and dreamt the thing, but when I mentioned it to a couple friends the next day at school, 2 other kids say that they saw the same thing. One lived a few streets over, another was in a different part of town. We asked our parents, but they either didn't believe us or hadn't seen it. I've searched for this on and off for years. Reddit, forums, old TV hijack lists. I've never found anything even close. If anyone else remembers something like this in Ohio around the early 2000s, please tell me I'm not losing it.
Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord. Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord. Jesus Christ, help us all, Lord.
On January 3rd, 2007, viewers in Australia were watching a Canadian show called Mayday. Partway through the episode, a clear male voice with an American accent cut in, saying what you just heard. Jesus Christ help us all, Lord. The line kept repeating over and over while the show continued, looping for about 6 minutes before it finally stopped. The channel came out later saying nothing illegal had happened. A network spokesperson claimed the audio was part of the original program. People were still super confused, of course. This just seemed like a very weak excuse. So some independent researchers looked into it and they figured it out. Turned out the voice came from a recorded news broadcast during the Iraq War, filmed on September 20th, 2005, showing a civilian truck being ambushed. How that audio ended up on an episode of a totally unrelated show 2 years later, though, that's never been explained. In early 2002, cable TV viewers in cities across China suddenly had their regular programming cut off by something completely different. It was a coordinated hijack carried out by members of Falun Gong, a spiritual group that had been heavily cracked down on by the Chinese government. The goal was to push back against the official stories surrounding a highly publicized incident from the year before. The clips accused the state of lying and called to an end to the persecution of Falun Gong. How long it lasted depended on where you were. In some cities it was over in a few minutes, in others, people reported it running for close to an hour, and in a few cases, even longer. This wasn't done remotely or through computers. The people involved physically tapped into cable broadcasting lines, which meant scouting locations, accessing equipment, and taking serious risks to pull it off. A few months later, police arrested 15 people tied to the hijack, and apparently, a bunch of them just happened to die in custody. In 1980, a cartoon called The Plastic Man Comedy Adventure Show was airing in Atlanta. And right in the middle of a commercial break, the screen suddenly cut to a still photo of a nude woman for just a couple seconds. The image had been spliced into a Georgia Forestry Commission ad. Turns out, it wasn't an accident. The station's general manager, Fred Barber, later said that 2 control operators had done it on purpose. These were the people who handled overnight sign-offs and morning startups. Apparently one of them liked splicing random stuff onto tapes as a joke. This time, a morning staffer didn't catch it before it went live. Both operators were fired immediately. In 1959, a few thousand people in Michigan tuned in to watch the World Series, only to have their screens go completely black for the first 3 games. First, everyone assumed it was just a technical issue, but it wasn't. A former station employee named Harold Lindgren had snuck into a relay station about 35 miles outside town and deliberately jammed the signal. In a pretty blunt way, too. He just shoved a bunch of steel wool into a pipe in the transmitter. He'd been fired a few weeks earlier and wanted revenge on the boss who let him go. Technicians from Chicago and Green Bay were brought in to figure out what had gone wrong. When police finally tracked him down, Lindgren didn't even attempt to hide anything. In 2007, Czech TV's Sunday morning show Panorama shocked a lot of viewers. Normally it was just calm footage of mountain resorts with soft background music. It was basically just a tourist ad, but on June 17th, one of the live cameras suddenly cut to what looked like a small nuclear explosion in the countryside. It only lasted a few seconds before the feed went static, which probably just made the whole thing more believable. The explosion was fake though, pure CGI, but it wasn't just added digitally later. A local art collective had physically tampered with the mountaintop camera to play their pre-recorded clip as if it were happening live. People freaked out, of course. Local tourism offices were pissed, worried it could scare visitors. Czech TV looked into taking action, but the collective behind it just shrugged and called it a social experiment. They wanted people to stop trusting everything they saw on TV, and for a few terrifying seconds, it worked. In 1987, the Playboy channel was briefly hijacked by a black screen displaying white text quoting Bible verses, instructing viewers to honor the Sabbath and repent. The Federal Communications Commission looked into it, and their investigation eventually led to a man named Thomas Haney, an engineer for the Christian Broadcasting Network. They found subtle traces in the signal that matched CBN's equipment. CBN denied having any involvement, and Haney said he didn't do it. Tests trying to recreate the hijack with the same equipment failed, but they still argued that Haney had the access and knowledge to carry this out. So he was convicted on 2 accounts related to the hijack, but cleared of interfering with another adult channel due to lack of evidence. He didn't serve time, but he did receive probation, a fine, and community service. In May 2006, WBAB, a rock station based on Long Island, had its signal hijacked during a regular morning broadcast. Listeners were hearing Pink Floyd's Hey You, but the song suddenly cut out. And what replaced it was probably the most racist song I've ever heard. I mean, yeah, we obviously can't play this for you here. It's full of all the worst slurs, modern and old school. The song was recorded in the 60s by Johnny Rebel, who was just an openly racist American singer. The song played for about a minute to a minute and a half before the station's normal feed returned. As for how this happened, it wasn't someone messing around with a weak pirate transmitter. The hijacker appeared to have overridden the station's studio to transmitter link, the signal stations use to send audio from the studio to the broadcast tower. To interrupt it, someone would have needed technical knowledge, the right equipment, and enough power to overpower the station's own signal. The station staff had no control while it was happening. Engineers couldn't cut it off remotely, which meant the interference was happening closer to the transmitter than the studio was. WBAB immediately called it a federal crime and contacted the FCC. And this wasn't the first time this had happened. A couple weeks earlier, the same song had briefly interrupted WBLI, WBAB's sister station. So for whatever reason, the person responsible was deliberately targeting those stations. But the FCC never made any statement about any arrests. As far as anyone knows, the person responsible got away with it.
In our number 6 spot, we have Antique Roadshow Reptile. In this video, captured on camera, it is a regular episode of the BBC show The Antiques Roadshow, when, in the background, the camera captured a man staring at the camera. His eyes appear pretty large, being opened quite wide, and if you zoom in, it looks as if his pupils have slits. His eyes resemble a snake's eyes, revealing that he is obviously a shape-shifter snake. He doesn't appear to be with anyone, just hanging in the background, smirking at what he's observing. It's crazy to see this on camera, but I wonder if anyone has actually seen this in person. My suspicious brain would probs not even believe anyone, even if they did claim that they saw this in real life. I'd be like, show me that proof, or nothing. I'll just be sad. In our number 5 spot, we have the NBC shapeshifter. In 1995, there was reportedly an NBC News reporter by the name of Isaiah Carey who was in the middle of filming when he allegedly swallowed a grasshopper. What's eerie about this video is that if you zoom in, you can observe him having an abnormally large, somewhat pointy tongue, and the color is slightly green. The reporter had a very big reaction, which, I mean, if I swallowed a grasshopper, I would have screamed. Drama queen. But most people think that he turned away from the camera to hide his tongue, which does seem possible, but then again, no one wants to have something that gross documented on camera, so I would probably turn away too. Reptile or human? Probably reptile. In our number 4 spot, we have the Mexican schoolboy. In a video that was shared in September of 2018, there appears to be a boy and a girl, and a lot of chaos around them. Students leaving their seats and a lot of hustle and bustle when all of a sudden, the girl seems to turn into the boy, and the boy falls down and faints. She runs down the stairs, now as him, and then after 30 seconds on the ground, the boy, who's being approached by adults, he suddenly wakes up and begins to run at top speed away from the scene. Honestly, this one to me feels like it's straight out of a sci-fi show. I mean, at one part it does look like it's filmed on a phone, but for the most part it kind of gives me old Degrassi The Next Generation vibes, but maybe that's just me. Anyone else with me? But people say that it is real, and so all I have to say is that, damn. Yep, that's all I've got. In our number 3 spot, we have the shape-shifting goat. In 2009, Nigerian police actually arrested a goat as apparently someone had shape-shifted into it. It was caught by vigilantes who were chasing 2 men who were trying to steal a Mazda car. They claimed that one of the 2 men escaped while the other used black magic to transform into a goat. Okay, this one wasn't caught on camera, but I thought you had to be told about this because I'm tripping out. Reportedly, the police said one of them escaped and the other turned into a goat. We cannot confirm the theory, but the goat is in our custody. This is the best one I've ever done. We cannot base our information on something mystical. It is something that has to be proved scientifically that a human being turned into a goat. Okay, so anyone else kinda hoping this story isn't true only because then the story is that a bunch of police arrested a goat? Honestly, I'm good with either story being true. In our number 2 spot, we have the alien security guard. In 2012, at the US-Israel Policy Conference, while President Obama was making a speech, there were cameras that were circulating around the area and they were shooting footage of the audience. From the front view, we see 2 security guards standing in the aisle. They look like, you know, they're most likely CIA agents. But then a camera shoots the security guards from behind. And one of them in particular does not look human from behind, as well as the camera catches him looking completely different than he does from the front. We see a bald man with no ears and a pointy chin. His nose looks short and rounded, and his eyes appear to be dark and quite sunken in. Most people think that because it was so dark and crowded that people would have missed this, and that the camera caught this shapeshifter in a blip of a moment in its true form. Many have concluded from this footage that the US is in cahoots with an alien race. And at this point, I'm pretty convinced too. What do you think? In our number 1 spot, we have the alleyway shifter. Okay, this clip is crazy. This is footage of a person that goes into an alleyway that is semi-lit and stands still. And then what appears to be a dark shadow leaves its body and walks away, and the person remains frozen. This clip is so controversial and has been a point of debate for some time now, but I'm not sure what you can even debate. You can clearly see someone or something leave the body and the body stays frozen in place. This clip is one of the most seemingly real clips out of everything I saw, but apparently all of the footage is real. Interesting. Very interesting indeed. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, my lovelies, and beware of your neighbor. They could be a shapeshifter. Just kidding. Or am I?
Imagine watching a live news report and suddenly the reporter's words turn into total gibberish. That's exactly what happened during a CBS Los Angeles broadcast from the 2011 Grammy Awards. Viewers were stunned when reporter Serene Branson went from speaking normally to uttering a string of nonsensical sounds on live TV.
Well, a very, very heavy debatation tonight. We had a very Darrison.
She visibly panicked as she realized something was wrong, leading many to fear that she was having a stroke on air. Paramedics rushed to examine her, and thankfully, her vital signs were normal. It turned out Serene had suffered a complex migraine that mimicked stroke-like symptoms, causing sudden aphasia or speech impairment. In other words, her brain glitched, scrambling her speech. The clip went viral as a real-life Matrix moment, a healthy young reporter seemingly malfunctioning without warning. It was a scary sight, but also a relief when we learned it wasn't a true stroke. Still, for a few seconds of live TV, it felt like reality itself had briefly broken down. A famous weatherman suddenly freezes like an NPC caught in lag. On the Today Show in 2012, co-hosts Savannah Guthrie and Matt Lauer finished a silly dance joking about leaving room for the Holy Ghost between dance partners. That's when Al Roker, the beloved NBC weatherman, did the unthinkable. He stared directly into the camera, motionless with a goofy grin for a full 17 seconds. He didn't blink, didn't move a muscle. It was as if someone hit the pause button on Al Roker. Roker later explained that it was a bit of deadpan humor, essentially a brain freeze challenge he did on purpose. The show's director egged him on to see how long he could hold the pose, and Al committed to the bit. Even so, watching it back, many viewers felt a chill. The moment looked so uncanny that it's now a classic glitch in the Matrix clip. During a live soccer match, a shadow person sprinted through the stands, and no one can agree if it was a glitch, a ghost, or just a camera trick. This incident happened at a stadium in La Paz, Bolivia, during a Fox Sports broadcast in 2014. In the footage, you see a dark, human-shaped figure running rapidly across the lower tier seats straight through the crowd, yet no one in the audience seems to react to it. Viewers at home were creeped out. Was it a ghost caught on live TV? Rational explanations soon emerged. Lighting snafu or video artifact, basically a technical glitch that made a real person's image smear across the screen. But that hasn't stopped wild theories. The clip went viral with some saying the stadium is haunted or that we witnessed a Matrix running program acting up. What's freakier than one person glitching? How about two people glitching together? Twin sisters Paula and Bridget Powers from Australia gave an interview that left viewers' jaws on the floor. They were recounting a dramatic carjacking incident involving their mother, but it wasn't the story that stole the show, it was how they told it. The twins spoke in a mesmerizing stereo, often saying the exact same words at the exact same time during the live interview.
So we drop everything and we went running out the front. We seen Mum running out from the house up there.
At times, one twin would start a sentence and the other would finish it in perfect sync, as if they shared one mind. The effect was so uncanny that the clip went viral worldwide, and even Jimmy Kimmel invited them on his show out of sheer fascination. The sisters themselves just laughed it off, saying their brains think alike at the same time after a lifetime together. Indeed, Paula and Bridget have spent 51 years dressing alike, working together, and practically living in parallel. So, while it seems paranormal, it's likely just an extraordinary sibling bond. Viewers thought they spotted a shape-shifting reptilian on the news, but the truth was more technological. In an old CTV news clip that resurfaced online, a female reporter delivers the headlines when suddenly her eyes appear to glitch. During a blink, her eyes don't look human for a split second, they seem fixed and glazed over, almost like a doll's, or a computer-rendered image. Experts explained that it was a rolling screen repaint artifact from the broadcast. Basically, this was an analog TV signal glitch. On old antenna TV, if the signal degrades at the wrong moment, in this case when she blinked, part of the previous frame's data can briefly hold on for a second. The result? Her eyes open from a prior frame overlaid on her face while blinking, creating a creepy illusion that her eyes blinked but didn't close? Technical or not, it looked really freaky, like an NPC in a video game failing to load its textures. Even after hearing the explanation, some joked, "Sure, that's what they want you to believe." This one isn't a glitch in the video, it's a glitch in the broadcast itself, and it's straight up like something out of a techno thriller. In November 1987, Chicago sportscaster Dan Roan was doing the nightly news when suddenly the signal hijacked. TV screens went black for a second, and then viewers were suddenly staring at a bizarre figure. Someone in a Max Headroom mask bobbing around in front of a swiveling metal background. No sound, just 30 seconds of this super creepy masked intruder. Engineers managed to regain control on that channel, but it wasn't over. About 2 hours later, during a Doctor Who episode on another station, Max Headroom hacker struck again, this time with audio. The masked person spoke in distorted garbles, laughed, moaned, even exposed their bare behind to the camera while being spanked with a fly swatter. Yeah, it was really weird. After about 90 seconds, the pirate broadcast ended. Viewers and station officials were completely baffled. Who was that? How did they break into major TV station signals? The Federal Communications Commission launched an investigation, but to this day, the culprits have still never been caught or identified. Even decades later, watching the Max Headroom incident on YouTube will give you a serious case of the heebie-jeebies. Somebody has the chance to have the best deathbed confession of all time. Imagine your grandfather, you're saying your final goodbyes, and he's like, "I was Max Headroom." That would be crazy.
On December 3rd, 1979 in Cincinnati, almost 20,000 people were waiting outside Riverfront Coliseum to see The Who. Venue decided to do festival seating, so no assigned seats. Everyone just rushes in to grab the best spot. But they only opened a few doors to let everyone in. Late afternoon rolls around, and the band starts doing their sound check. The crowd outside heard it and thought the show was starting. Cue absolute mayhem. People started pushing forward, and it got so packed that people literally couldn't breathe. Some people were actually lifted right off their feet by the crush of bodies. 11 people died that night from compressive asphyxiation, basically being squeezed to death. The band had no idea any of this was happening. The promoter didn't tell them, because he was scared that canceling the show would start a full-blown riot with everyone already inside. Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend didn't find out until after they finished playing. This whole nightmare changed how concerts work in America. Cincinnati banned unassigned seating for over 20 years, and venues everywhere started taking crowd control way more seriously. In 2014, during an outdoor performance by the K-pop group 4 Minute in Songnam, North Korea, the venue became so packed that about 30 people climbed onto a large ventilation grate to get a better view of the stage. This grate covered an air shaft that dropped deep into an underground parking garage. As the crowd danced and jumped to the music, the metal support brackets couldn't handle the weight. The grate suddenly gave way, sending 27 people plummeting 65 feet down. The performance continued for several minutes because the band couldn't hear the collapse over the loud music. 16 people were dead and 11 were seriously injured. The safety official responsible for the event's security, he ended up taking his own life just hours after being questioned by the police. Turns out the grate was installed crappy welding, didn't have the reinforcement that it needed. In May of 1999 at WWF's Over the Edge pay-per-view in Kansas City, Owen Hart was scheduled to make a dramatic entrance as his superhero character, the Blue Blazer, but fell chest first onto the top rope before landing in the ring. The live television audience didn't see the fall because a pre-taped promo was playing, but some of the fans in the arena saw the fall. But the lights in the arena were off at the time, so fortunately not everyone had to see it. The broadcast cut back to announcer Jim Ross, who had to inform the viewers at home that this wasn't a wrestling angle, meaning it wasn't part of the show, that Owen had suffered a real-life medical emergency, and later in the show, he had to tell everyone that he'd passed away, 17-032. But the show went on. After they cleared the ring, other wrestlers had to go out and perform on the same mat where their friend had just fallen and died. WWE's decision to keep going, still one of the most controversial calls in entertainment history. In 2011, just before the country duo Sugarland was about to go on, this massive gust front from a thunderstorm slammed into the Indiana State Fairgrounds. We're talking 60 to 70 mile per hour winds. The wind hit the stage's overhead rig with all the lights, speakers, and metal beams. Within seconds, the whole steel structure came crashing down right onto the pit. 7 people died and almost 60 got injured. Fans caught it all on video too. You can see how fast it happened and hear people screaming as they tried to lift those massive beams off the trapped victims. The investigation that followed found that the temporary roof structure hadn't been built to withstand the winds that hit that night. There was also a bunch of confusion between the people running the fair and the band's people about when to evacuate. After this, there were way stricter rules for temporary stages and better weather monitoring at outdoor festivals like this. On December 8th, 2004, heavy metal band Damage Plan was performing at the Alrosa Villa nightclub in Columbus, Ohio. Just as the set began, a 25-year-old man named Nathan Gale climbed onto the stage. At first, people assumed he was an overly excited fan until he suddenly pulled out a firearm. He went straight for guitarist Dimebag Darrell, one of the founding members of Pantera, firing at him repeatedly at close range. Panic erupted instantly as the crowd realized this was a real attack unfolding right in front of them. Gale then turned toward the audience and stage crew. A fan who tried to stop him was killed, along with a club employee and a member of the band's security team. At one point, he grabbed the man from the crowd and held him in front of him as a shield. It all came to an end when a police officer entered through a rear door and fired at Gale, taking him out. Turns out the shooter was a paranoid schizophrenic who thought the band was stealing his thoughts. This is still probably the most targeted attack on a musician during a live show and completely changed security at small and medium venues. Stone the Crows was this up-and-coming blues rock band from Scotland. In 1972, during a performance at the Top Rank Suite in Swansea, Wales, the band's guitarist Leslie Harvey walked up to the front of the stage to address the crowd. As he reached for the microphone, with the fingers on his other hand still on his guitar strings, he completed an electrical circuit, a deadly electrical circuit. The equipment wasn't properly grounded, and because Harvey's hands were damp with sweat from being under the hot stage lights, he was electrocuted. He was literally frozen in place, unable to let go of the microphone as the current surged through him. His bandmates in the audience watched in horror, at first not realizing why he was shaking and unable to speak. A roadie eventually kicked the mic stand away to break the connection, but the damage was done. Harvey died on the way to the hospital at only 27 years old. Unsolved. In 2000, Pearl Jam was headlining the Roskilde Festival in Denmark when the crowd of 50,000 people began to push forward. It wasn't a mosh pit, it was a crowd collapse. People at the front tripped and fell, and then the people behind them, unaware of what was happening, just kept pushing forward, trapping people on the ground under layers of bodies. Eddie Vedder eventually realized something was wrong and stopped the show, pleading with the audience to take 3 steps back. But 9 young men were crushed or trampled to death in the mud. The festival was criticized for having slippery ground and inadequate breaker barriers to stop the flow crowd. For years, Pearl Jam just refused to play festivals because of the trauma of that night, which is understandable. Love Parade used to be one of the world's biggest electronic dance music festivals. In 2010, they held it in Duisburg, Germany at this former freight station. The only way in or out was through a narrow tunnel. When the venue hit capacity, police blocked the entrance, but they didn't stop people from entering the tunnel from the other side. This created a pressure cooker effect, where thousands of people were trapped in an enclosed space with nowhere to go. People started panicking, struggling to breathe in the heat and cramped conditions. Some tried climbing metal emergency ladders or up the steep sides, but a lot of them fell back into the crowd. 21 people died from thoracic compression, basically being crushed while standing up, and over 500 got injured. The festival never happened again. Investigators found that organizers had ignored tons of warnings about the tunnel's capacity. Government got accused of cutting corners because they wanted the prestige of hosting the event. On December 6, 1969, the Rolling Stones were headlining the Altamont Free concert at Altamont Speedway in California. Supposed to be like a West Coast Woodstock, but pretty much everything went wrong. The organizers hired Hell's Angels as security and paid them with booze. As the day went on, things got more and more heated between the bikers, the crowd, and just bad stage placement that put the band right up close to tens of thousands of people. Fights kept breaking out in front of the stage. During the Stones set, this 18-year-old named Meredith Hunter pulls out a firearm after getting shoved and beaten by Hell's Angels. Hell's Angel Alan Pissarro rushes him and jabs Hunter multiple times with a blade. Hunter dies right there in the crowd while the concert keeps going, and a lot of this was caught on camera. Documentary crews caught it on film. It's in the 1970 movie Gimme Shelter. Most people in the crowd had no idea someone had just been killed yards from the stage. The band didn't find out until after. Pissarro was later acquitted on self-defense because of the footage. In December 2016, an underground electronic music show was being held at a warehouse in Oakland known as the Ghost Ship. The building was an artist collective that was really never permitted for housing or public events. It was filled with flammable stuff like wooden pallets, tapestries, vintage furniture, and while during the show, a fire broke out. And it spread crazy fast through all the clutter. There were no sprinklers, no exit signs. The only way down from the second floor where the music was playing was this narrow makeshift staircase made of wooden crates. 36 people died, most from smoke inhalation before the flames even got to them. A lot of victims were found huddled together, unable to find the exit in the pitch black smoke. In 2007, viewers of a Czech TV's Sunday morning show Panorama got a pretty disturbing surprise. The program usually just airs quiet, scenic shots from mountain resorts, basically tourism ads. But on June 17th, the feed from one of the cameras suddenly showed what looked like a small nuclear explosion going off in the countryside. It only lasted a few seconds and ended in static. This was subtle enough that some viewers didn't know if it was real or not, but the explosion was actually fake. It was CGI, planted by a local art collective. They'd physically tampered with the mountaintop camera to inject their pre-recorded video into the live broadcast. It's a creepy video. Really hits that analog horror kind of vibe before the analog horror genre was fully formed. Just this shot of a calm scenic landscape with lazy elevator music playing in the background, and then this horrific explosion going off in the distance, totally offsetting everything. It all looks pretty convincing too. The group had pulled off other stunts before, but this one hit a nerve, especially with tourism businesses in the area who said it could scare visitors away. Czech TV considered legal action, but the group framed it as a kind of social experiment about media trust, forcing people to question what they were seeing on TV. In 1985, 4 Polish scientists pulled off something that looked more like a science fair project than a protest, but really rattled the government. These were astronomers, not hackers, and they used a ZX Spectrum home computer, some homemade circuits, and a transmitter to beam anti-regime messages right onto state-run TV in the city of Torun. Overlaid on the screen was text saying, "Solidarity, Torun. Boycotting the election is our duty. And solidarity, Torun. Enough price hikes, lies, and repression." All of it was signed with the logo of banned labor movement. Viewers at home were probably stunned to see the state's broadcast suddenly taken over by what looked like on-screen subtitles calling out the system. It didn't last long, but it did make a point. The 4 scientists were eventually caught and charged with owning an illegal transmitter and publishing what was labeled dangerous material. They received 4 months in jail and a fine. Put yourself in the shoes of some dude tuning into the Playboy channel in 1987. You know, you have a mullet, you just finished cruising the highway with your top down blasting Motley Crue on the radio, and the best way to top off the day is to tune in to the channel with maybe a brew or two. That was the 80s, right? Well, on this day, you're in the middle of your spicy movie when all of a sudden the screen gets overtaken by this black background with a simple white message quoting Bible verses telling people to honor the Sabbath and repent. That kind of kills the vibe. Well, the FCC eventually zeroed in on a guy named Thomas Haney, who worked as an uplink engineer for the Christian Broadcasting Network. Even though the message didn't say where it came from, investigators noticed certain video fingerprints, subtle traces in the signal that hinted at the type of equipment used, and from that they connected it to CBN. The station denied being involved, of course. Haney swore he was innocent, and CBN said their gear couldn't have even pulled it off. They tried to recreate the hijack using the same setup and failed, but the government argued otherwise, saying that it was possible and that Haney had the access and technical know-how. Eventually, a jury convicted him on 2 counts, though he was cleared of interfering with another adult channel due to poor video evidence. He didn't serve time, but he did get probation, a fine, and community service. Gotta say, I'm no expert on things like this, but I don't think things would play out the same way today. I don't know. I don't think the dude would have gotten in nearly as much trouble today. Society's just, I don't know, a little more prudish these days. They took their Playboy very seriously back in the 80s, it seems. In early 2002, cable TV viewers in several Chinese cities were suddenly interrupted by unexpected programming. It was a planned hijack by members of Falun Gong, a spiritual group that had been heavily suppressed by the Chinese government. The hijackers wanted to challenge the official version of a disturbing public event from the year before. They showed videos disputing state propaganda and calling for an end to persecution. Depending on the city, the hijack lasted anywhere from a few minutes to nearly an hour, and some reports even longer. These weren't digital hacks, they physically tapped into broadcasting equipment, which took some serious planning. A few months later, 15 people were arrested, and they were given very harsh prison sentences. In the years that followed, reports came out that several of those arrested had died while in custody. But those claims have been hard to verify because of how tightly China controls information. During the 2006 Lebanon War, Israel managed to break into Hezbollah's Al-Manar TV and broadcast their own message, a very direct threat aimed at Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. His face appeared on screen with crosshairs over it, followed by the sound of 3 loud pops and footage of Israeli airstrikes. It only lasted a few seconds. The point was, quite obviously, not subtle. Fast forward to 2014 during the Gaza conflict, and this time the other side hijacked Israel's Channel 10 with a warning telling people to stay in their bomb shelters, mixed with graphic images from Gaza. Then again in 2016, people watching Big Brother on Israel's Channel 2 suddenly had their feed cut and replaced with another propaganda clip. That one lasted about 3.5 minutes, just long enough to get noticed before it was pulled. None of these takeovers were super polished, but they were meant to shake people up, not just jam the airwaves, but get into viewers' heads. When we're talking about broadcast interruptions that terrified the public, well, these are pretty much the textbook definition. Now, when you first start watching this, you may not think much of it. Looks like a streaker running around a soccer field, right? Or football field for the British viewers out there. Thing is, I'm not sure it's as simple as that. See, this person runs around for a long time. There are multiple angles here where we see this person running both through the audience and right on the edge of the field, and no one seems to react. And the more you look at this figure, the stranger it looks, in that it's not quite solid. It's semi-translucent and almost seems to run right through people. Strangest part for me though is when it actually looks to be running on the field. If someone just bursts onto a soccer field, they'd be escorted off in a matter of seconds. I mean, we've seen this happen with streakers before, and you know, of course, streakers don't look like semi-translucent ghostly forms like this. This is a very strange video. This live CNN broadcast has become pretty infamous for having possibly captured Michael Jackson's ghost on camera. Now, is Michael Jackson's spirit evil? Well, that depends where you fall on all the controversy behind him. That's a rabbit hole I will not be getting into, but this video is pretty interesting. So this was early July of 2009, less than a month after MJ had died, and they're doing an interview at Neverland Ranch when we see this. Okay, so it's a shadow, big deal. Well, there may be more to it than that. Slowing things down and zooming in on this shadowy shape more, and you'll notice that it kind of resembles that famous head tilted down Jackson pose, and if you look really closely, you'll see that this supposed shadow seems to cast its own shadow on the floor, almost like it's not a shadow at all that's being cast on the wall, more like a dark figure moving across the hallway. The other strange thing, who would have cast this shadow? We never see anyone actually walk by. Obviously, shadows can be kind of iffy, but this one is a little bit spooky, given the context. Did a woman possessed by a jinn call into this live talk show? So this happened on an Islamic channel hosting a live call-in session. A woman calls in and shares that she believes people have used black magic against her, and that a demon or a jinn has taken over her body. She talks about how she's doing her best to combat it through constant prayer, and throughout the call, she makes these really unsettling noises. She also starts to laugh maniacally at one point. Take a listen to this. Now, was this woman really possessed? Who am I to say? But even if she wasn't, there may have been something else going on with her, something still very real, which is equally sad and disturbing. Or it may have been a hoax. Either way, it's an eerie video. Creepy phone calls just get under my skin. It's something about the fact that I can't see the person on the other end of the phone. Back in 2021, news anchor Sam Hessler was doing live shots during the morning news from the Green Ridge Cemetery in Saratoga County, New York. Nobody noticed anything at the time until a viewer reached out to the station saying that he'd seen something walking behind her. Take a look. It passes by pretty fast, so here it is slowed down now. Now, Green Ridge Cemetery has somewhat of a reputation for being a spooky spot. Not only are there some really creepy statues and some very old graves here, but people have reported seeing some strange things. Not too out of the ordinary for a cemetery though, to be fair. Now that's a good question. Was there a ghost at an Albuquerque Dion's? And what is a Dion's even? Well, it turns out even a lot of Americans won't be familiar because Dion's are only found in 3 states, mostly in New Mexico. Anyway, this particular one might be haunted. Look at this. So all this stuff just slides off the counter seemingly on its own. No one is anywhere near it. You could say the stuff had just been sitting there precariously and fell off, but it doesn't really look like that. It looks like someone took their arm and swept everything off the table, only of course there's no arm in sight. Anyway, what do you all think of this one? In 1977, viewers in Madison, Wisconsin, watching The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, experienced something completely unexpected. The broadcast was suddenly interrupted by this unknown video signal that replaced the show. There's never been a recording of the interruption released. The hijacked footage reportedly showed unrelated video that had nothing to do with NBC programming. After a short time, normal programming resumed, as if nothing had happened. What made this case strange is how little information ever came about afterward. The station acknowledged that there had been this unauthorized signal intrusion, but they never released any details aside from that. At the time though, overriding a broadcast signal required what's called a line of sight access to transmission paths or relay equipment, meaning whoever did this must have known exactly how the station's setup worked. So it was either an insider or someone who just had a lot of technical knowledge of broadcast engineering. There's a case about interruptions on stations in Detroit during the mid-80s, but the internet's frustratingly thin when it comes to exactly what viewers saw. What is known is that people in Detroit at the time reported their TV picture suddenly becoming distorted, the clear broadcast breaking up, flickering, and then showing imagery that didn't come from the station's own programming. This lasted for a while before finally returning to normal. Apparently, it had nothing to do with the weather or technical trouble or some internal station error. The interruption was something forced into the feed, but why? There was no clear message, there was no slogan or overlaid graphic or audio saying anything. It was just random visuals replacing the normal show for a moment. That's what separates it from a lot of the other hijacks on this list, where someone tries to make some kind of a point or just prank everyone. That's more on that later. Instead, this felt like someone poking at the system rather than trying to broadcast a message. An investigation was opened at the time, but nothing ever came of it. But this was WJBK, a major station. So the idea that someone could physically interrupt the signal without leaving a trace was kind of a big deal. In the early 80s, people watching HBO in various parts of the US started noticing something strange as well. During regular programming, the picture would sometimes drop out of the scheduled lineup and briefly show totally unrelated video or static, often with distorted sound. These interruptions bounced in and out without warning. Because HBO and other networks were being delivered by satellite back then, some people suspected the disruptions weren't just local cable issues, but something hitting the network before it even reached cable systems. The way the feeds worked at the time meant that someone with access to satellite uplinks or relay paths could theoretically inject a signal upstream, whatever the hell all that means. But it would cause the viewer to see something unexpected. As for what the hacker or hackers were trying to do though, who knows? There didn't seem to be any purpose behind them. They didn't repeat at the same times, they didn't target specific shows or networks. It didn't come with any text or voice explaining why they appeared. In 2015, a CNN reporter, Katie Kairos, and her cameraman went to a house in Hanover, Pennsylvania to film a segment about a woman named Deanna Simpson who said her home was haunted. Deanna claimed she'd been living with spirits for 7 years, and they weren't the friendly kind. She told the crew the ghosts had attacked her husband, and their pets, and that she'd heard voices and screaming at night. But it wasn't just what Deanna was describing that was creepy. Stuff started happening on camera. Cameraman Nick Petrillo suddenly felt something burning his hand. When he looked down, there were these fresh scratches on his wrist. Deanna didn't seem surprised either. It's because you're telling the story. They don't want it out there. That's their way of warning, she said, before sprinkling holy water on him. Kairos later said she also felt something touch and pinch her during the filming. The crew caught orbs on camera and watched a door slam shut after Deanna asked whatever it was there to show itself. Deanna told them she had recordings of voices like laughing children when no one else was home as well. And she said there were at least 5+ spirits living there. Some women here that are protecting me, but the majority are bad, dark forces, inhuman, she said. During a 2023 live episode of the Argentine TV show Fenómenos, co-host Matthias Bertolotti was in the middle of giving the weekend forecast when the show switched to one of their outdoor cameras, a live feed overlooking a quiet boardwalk in Corrientes City. Everything looked totally normal until a viewer at home spotted something off. People watched as what looked like a human figure ran across the boardwalk. Oh, a person ran along the boardwalk? Incredible story, James. Where do you find these things? Well, there's more to it than that. Take a look. It's semi-translucent, ghostly looking. When the host replayed the footage during the broadcast, both of them were clearly shaken. Bertolotti leaned in and said, "It's a person running and then vanishing. There are no legs." He told viewers there was no editing or trick involved. The feed was live the whole time. During a live news broadcast in the UK on February 1st, 2021, viewers caught something strange happening behind the anchor that had nothing to do with the story being read. Through the large studio windows, a glowing glowing object zipped across the sky. Bright, fast, clearly visible on camera. The clip started spreading almost immediately online, of course, especially after conspiracy blogger Scott C. Waring picked it up. Waring, who runs the site UFO Sightings Daily, posted the footage, claiming it showed, quote, 100% proof of UFOs over London. He said he slowed down the video and noticed something even weirder, saying what looks like one UFO is actually two. The UFOs are flying side by side. He compared their movement to US Air Force jets that take off in pairs, saying the two lights seem to move in a wingman formation. The video was filmed during a standard live broadcast, nothing edited or staged. Some viewers thought it could have been a drone or reflection, but what do you think this thing was? During a live morning broadcast in Honduras, journalist Carlos Molina experienced something really odd. While reading viewer messages alongside his co-host Pablo Zapata, he suddenly froze as his glass of water just slid across the table. He also said that seconds before this even happened, he'd felt this chill run down his spine. Carlos made it clear no one on the crew was pulling a prank. I felt something strange in my body. The action didn't just demonstrate itself in the glass, but in me as well. What I felt was a supernatural phenomenon, a chill throughout my body before the glass moved, he said. The table was also flat, and apparently there were no strings or wires, and it all happened live on air. During a live feed from the International Space Station on January 5th, 2020, viewers watching NASA's stream noticed something strange drifting across the blackness of space. The camera showed what looked like a glowing object, faint but clearly moving during a broadcast that was supposed to be all about a scheduled spacewalk by astronauts Jessica Meir and Christina Koch. The clip was later shared on the YouTube channel Spacelink TV, and it shows a light gliding upward in the distance before slowly fading out of view. Researcher Thomas Mike Jensen was the first one to analyze it. At first he thought it might just be a lens reflection or a sun flare, but after studying the movement frame by frame, Jensen wasn't so sure. It was moving slowly, and it is far from the Earth. You can see it moving out of the picture, he said, pointing out that reflections don't usually pulsate or travel like that either. The light looked like it was moving independently. It didn't look like glare. No one ever confirmed what it actually was, and NASA never issued a statement about it. This one always gives me the shivers. During the live coverage of Queen Elizabeth II's funeral on September 19, 2022, something really freaky was heard over the air. As the camera followed the hearse moving through London, viewers suddenly heard this.
That death is irreversible, and the fact that she's trapped.
As you can see,
a faint female voice whispers something, and then the broadcast immediately cuts back to the regular commentary. At the time, people weren't sure what they heard. Most people probably didn't even notice anything at first. But when someone posted the clip online, commenters determined that the voice said the death is irreversible and the fact that she's trapped. Did someone's microphone get picked up by mistake? Very likely, but that statement is just so chilling, isn't it? That death is irreversible and the fact that she's trapped? Not exactly comforting words to hear during a funeral. On November 26, 1977, viewers in southern England got way more than their usual Saturday evening programming. While ITN's Andrew Gardner was reading the news about clashes in Rhodesia, the broadcast suddenly went dead and was replaced by a deep buzzing sound, and then a voice started speaking. The voice claimed to be Vrillon, representing the Ashtar Galactic Command. For nearly 6 minutes it spoke. This is the voice of Vrillon, representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command, speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights in the skies. We come to warn you of the destiny of your race and your world. It went on to urge humans to remove their weapons, live in peace, and prepare for a great awakening as the planet entered the new age of Aquarius. At one point it warned there are many false prophets and guides at present operating on your world. They will suck your energy from you. Your inner divine self will protect you. And after 6 minutes, everything just went back to normal again. Investigators later found the hijack came through the Hannington transmitter, which rebroadcast an off-air signal from a nearby unauthorized transmitter. Apparently, someone with some serious skill had managed to override the signal. So even though this was a technical error, there were and still are a good number of people who actually do believe this message came from somewhere else. On August 5th, 2009, viewers tuning in to BBC North East's morning news saw something odd happening live on air. Anchor Colin Briggs was calmly reading the day's headlines, and behind him was a live webcam shot of the Millennium Bridge in Newcastle. Well, suddenly this bright white streak shot across the sky in the background. It wasn't falling down like a meteor would, it zipped upward, then vanished completely. Some started filming their TVs and uploading the clips to YouTube, convinced they'd just seen a UFO on live news. Others said it had to be a bird, maybe a toy plane, but the way it moved didn't really match either. Even Nick Pope, who used to investigate UFO reports from the UK Ministry of Defence, said the footage didn't look like a bird and that the movement was, quote, genuinely strange. The BBC later did a short follow-up asking viewers what they thought, but they never gave any real explanation. All these years later, nobody's managed to figure out exactly what flashed across the sky that morning. In 1971, NBC aired a segment that really shocked viewers, a real-life exorcism. At the time, most people didn't even know what an exorcism was. The 6-minute piece followed Edwin and Marcia Becker, a Chicago couple who claimed their house was haunted. Reporter Carol Simpson introduced the story, letting the Beckers describe the strange things happening at home. After the Catholic Church declined to get involved, the couple turned to the Independent Spiritualist Church in Chicago. The exorcism was led by Reverend William Darrell Davis and medium Joseph DeLuise. Everyone in the house, including the news crew, had to wear crucifixes for protection. At one point, DeLuise went into a trance and claimed to channel the voice of a spirit, an old woman speaking through him. While the ritual went on, a strong gust of wind shook the blinds. The team also used a mirror, offered communion to the spirit, and spread blessed salt around the rooms. Broadcast wrapped up with Simpson saying that the house had been quiet for several days since the exorcism, leaving viewers with this unsettling glimpse into a real haunting happening live on television. What is this thing hovering in the sky? This clip comes from a live news broadcast in Rio Branco, Brazil, back on February 9th, 2009. TV Gazeta had gone out to film after locals started reporting this weird, colorful object floating above the city. Camera caught it clearly, this glowing shape just hanging there, shifting colors from blue to red to white. More than 25 people saw it that night. Witnesses said it stayed up there for around 2 hours, barely moving before slowly drifting across the sky from east to south, then south to west. It didn't look like a plane, and it definitely wasn't acting like one. Drones existed back then, but in 2009 they weren't something you'd normally see flying over a city. Whatever this thing was, nobody ever managed to explain it. The broadcast just ended with everyone staring up, wondering what they were really looking at. This one sent a shiver down my spine. So back in 2018, CBS Colorado reported this really eerie story on the news. Police in Pueblo, Colorado had received a phone call just before 3:30 in the morning. The person on the other end hung up, so the police called back. There was an answer, but the 911 dispatcher could only hear static on the other end of the phone and the occasional inaudible muttering. Take a listen to this.
Hello?
Now, phone interference isn't uncommon, sure, but what makes this call extra chilling is that it was coming from a funeral home and cemetery. Police were sent out to the place, called Imperial Memorial Gardens, to check things out, but when they got there, they found that the funeral home was totally locked up. No lights were on, and there was nobody there. No one living, that is, and that just gives me the willies. In 2019, 9 News Australia did a story on a pub owned by a man named Alistair Collins, who claims the place is haunted, and he had tons of late-night security footage to prove it. Yeah, it wasn't just one incident. There's footage of chairs moving on their own, umbrellas opening up, doors slamming. The place is just bustling with activity even long after it empties out for the night. At one point, the news anchor tries to recreate pulling a chair out in one smooth motion like it seemed to do on its own in one piece of security footage, and he couldn't quite repeat it. The ground is just too uneven, so I have to imagine doing something like this with string would be really difficult. They also try to repeat the umbrella opening on its own and find that it would be next to impossible for someone to open the umbrella and not be caught on camera. The creepiest bit comes from an electrician who had a ghostly encounter at the pub while doing renovations, though. He heard the small doors swinging right by the kitchen, followed by loud footsteps going up the stairs right next to them. He called out to the only other person in the pub at the time, who walked out from the kitchen. So they both went upstairs to check things out, only to find the top floor was totally empty. This is Kenneth Copeland. Now, if you've never heard of him, he's a televangelist who basically makes a living, a very good living, mind you, just screwing gullible, desperate people out of their money. He's actually told people in some of his sermons that if they only have 2 dimes to their name, to give 1 to the Lord. through his church, of course, all so that he can buy more private planes, jet skis, mansions, and God knows what else. He's pretty much the devil, and the irony of that shouldn't be lost on anyone, but somehow there are still people who fall for his utter BS. Here he is talking in tongues. Now, it sounds to me like he's imitating Portuguese, not, communicating with some holy higher power. Again, I don't get the appeal of this guy. He doesn't even look friendly. He's got those beady little eyes. He looks deranged even when he's smiling. Just a real uncomfortable aura around this guy. In 2019, NBC did a report on a ghostly photograph taken at a Baltimore eatery called Bertha's Restaurant and Bar. According to one of the owners, Laura Norris, the place has been haunted for decades, and she's communicated with the entity on more than one occasion. Apparently, the block that this restaurant is on is just full of ghosts. There's a ghost tour that starts at Bertha's, and one tourist captured this image right here. It looks a bit like some sort of ghostly figure reaching out of the third floor window, and there is said to be a ghost that stalks that very floor, the spirit of a young girl who's often seen skipping through the hallway. In 1991, ABC aired a pretty wild and unsettling episode of 2020 that showed an exorcism happening live. The girl at the center of it was named Gina, and she was from Florida. According to the church, Gina had been dealing with demonic possession, so they decided to perform an exorcism to get rid of whatever was tormenting her. There were two priests involved. One was just called Priest A, the other was Reverend James Labar, who thought that airing the exorcism would give, quote, hope to those who may be afflicted. The whole thing is a very uncomfortable watch. Gina is seen shaking and screaming, and just possession aside even, she was clearly going through something. Even for people who believe in possession, it was a chilling watch, but for others, it looked more like she was going through some serious psychological distress. After the exorcism, Gina was sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. She was released later on, but after that, no one really knows what happened to her. So what is this thing hovering in the sky? This footage is from a live news broadcast in Rio Branco, Brazil. On February 9th, 2009, TV Gazeta showed up to capture what witnesses described as a colorful object hovering over the city. Whatever this thing was, it changed color multiple times, flashing from blue to red to white. There were more than 25 witnesses that night who watched as this thing hovered in the sky for more than 2 hours. Then it moved from east to south and afterwards south to west. Pretty strange. Certainly doesn't look like a plane or satellite to me, and not that a drone would be totally unheard of in 2009. They certainly weren't as widely used as they are now, though. Till this day, we still don't know exactly what this thing was. Alright, this one's pretty ridiculous, but I do love me some possession videos. Always fun to see what weird noises these evil spirits force out of people's mouths. Back in 2016, something pretty strange happened on a Thai talk show. A model came on the show and told everyone that she had picked up a ghost while on vacation in the city of Rayong the year before. She said this ghost was a pop, a type of spirit in Thai culture that's known for having an uncontrollable hunger. At first, she just calmly explained what had happened to her. Ghost got inside my body somehow. Well, and then right in the middle of the interview, the pop just had to embarrass this poor woman on live television. To be fair though, she should have seen this coming. She'd been dealing with the thing's antics for a whole year at this point. Suddenly she seems to switch, like something else is talking through her. She started speaking in a different voice and just couldn't seem to snap out of it. No matter how much the hosts pushed her to stop, they kept telling the spirit to leave her alone, but it refused, making threats like, "Don't mess with me," which probably sounds a lot cooler in Thai. Then one of the hosts pulls out a necklace with a Buddha pendant. As soon as he held it up, she freaks out, screaming and recoiling in terror. Very loudly, I might add. I had to turn down the volume almost all the way because I was worried everyone was going to hear female screams through my headphones and that I'd be kindly asked to leave the office. Eventually, the host puts the necklace on her though, and just like that, she seems to come back to her senses. The clip went viral in Thailand and racked up millions of views. Just what is it we're looking at here? Well, this aired on a local news station in Pueblo, Colorado, and the anchors were genuinely confused as were a lot of people watching, as to what they were looking at. It's some weird looking animal with patchy black fur, a reddish face, and long skinny arms hunched over eating something off the ground. Apparently the woman who filmed the creature had actually seen it once before, but she had no idea what it was either. Other than an animal with mange, the word chupacabra was thrown around a lot. Well, later on, Colorado Parks and Wildlife officials looked into it and said the animal was probably a raccoon with mange. Mange is a skin disease that can cause animals to lose most of their fur and look pretty rough. I mean, you take the cutest furry animal on earth, shave all its hair off, and it looks pretty damn freaky. This image here was shared on news stations all over the world. Nobody knew what the hell this thing was when news first broke, and nobody knows what it is now, but it's since become known as the unidentified Amarillo object. In 2022, the Amarillo Zoo in Texas got a lot of attention after they shared a strange image caught on their security cameras. The picture was taken at 1:25 a.m. by a motion detecting camera showing a bizarre figure walking just outside the zoo fence. And what's creepy is that it's walking on two legs. Clearly though, this is not a person, unless they're wearing a costume, which is an odd thing to be doing at 1:30 in the morning, skulking around a zoo. When the zoo posted the image on Twitter, they leaned into the mystery, asking, is it a person with a strange hat who likes to walk at night, a chupacabra? Do you have any ideas of what this UAO, unidentified Amarillo object, could be? The zoo never outright claimed it was anything supernatural or like a cryptid or anything, but they didn't offer up any solid explanations either, because they didn't have one. Now, could this have been a weird marketing stunt? Maybe, but city officials and the zoo's director, Michael Kashuba, insisted the photo was not staged. And 3 years later, we still don't have any solid answers. Back in 2014, ABC7 covered a story about a strange creature captured by a couple in South Texas. Jackie Stocks told the news crew that her husband spotted a weird creature in the yard eating corn. The husband said he'd hunted raccoons and said he'd never heard one growl like this before.
Parma says one of the big signs it's not a raccoon is its growl.
Now, they also interviewed an apparent wildlife expert who looked at footage of the strange animal and said it was probably a canine with mange. Thing is, canines do not use their hands the way this thing does. I mean, have you ever seen your dog eat like this? I didn't think so. Wildlife expert? Maybe go get a new career? I don't know. This footage was shown on One India News a few years ago. In Jharkhand, a group of bikers were riding along late at night when they saw this person walking along the side of the road. The video is pretty grainy, but you can still make out the figure. It looks pale, extremely thin, and moves in this weird, unnatural way. It doesn't seem to move its arms. It's like that character in Seinfeld that doesn't move when they walk. When it turns its head, it also seems to have these glowing yellowish eyes. So people online started commenting that this thing looked a lot like an alien. Of course, no one knows for sure what the bikers caught on camera, but whatever it is, I would be very uncomfortable seeing it anywhere at any time, let alone a rural road in the middle of the night. Back in 2019, 9 News Australia ran a story about a pub called the Tyler's Kiln. The pub is owned by a man named Alistair Collins, who's pretty convinced that the place is haunted. Collins had a whole collection of late night security footage showing some really odd stuff happening after hours. Chairs are seen sliding out from tables all by themselves. Umbrellas suddenly pop open with no one around, and doors slam shut even though the place is completely empty. One of the news anchors even tried to recreate the chair moving like it did in the footage, but he couldn't really pull it off. The ground is just too uneven to smoothly drag the chair like that, and setting up a string or some trick would have been pretty tough without showing up on camera. They also tested how the umbrella could have opened on its own and figured it would have been nearly impossible to pull off without someone being caught in the frame. The creepiest story probably came from an electrician who was working there during some renovations. He heard small doors swinging near the kitchen and loud footsteps heading upstairs. He thought the only other person in the building had, of course, gone upstairs, but when he called out, said person came walking out of the kitchen right in front of him. So what was going on up there? Well, they went upstairs to check, and no one was there. The whole top floor was completely empty. I love stories like that. Imagine chilling out on a regular afternoon, maybe watching a Steve Wilkos show, when suddenly your TV flashes this strange emergency alert. Only it isn't about a tornado or an Amber Alert. Instead, it's describing the bodies of the dead rising from their graves and attacking the living. On February 11th, 2013, people across the US were watching normal daytime TV when the screen suddenly cut to an emergency alert. And it was exactly what I just described. It sounded like the same system used for real disasters, except it was about zombies. It was on screen for a while. I gotta assume some people actually started freaking out, especially all those folks with bunkers full of canned food, but then programming snapped back to normal. Turned out hackers had broken into station equipment that was badly secured and used it to send these fake alerts, but they never found out who actually did this. In September 1985, during communist rule in Poland, 4 astronomers in the city of Torun did something extraordinary. They hijacked the state TV signal and replaced normal programming with text messages supporting the Solidarity Movement, a labor union and political group fighting against government oppression. The messages criticized rising food prices, the government's lies, and the control that they had over everyone's lives. It was a direct political protest. People couldn't believe what they were looking at. The state controlled all broadcasting, and independent messages were almost impossible to show. Pulling this off required technical knowledge of the broadcasting system. The astronomers had figured out how to override the state transmitter and insert their messages live. The interruption lasted only a few minutes, but it was long enough to be noticed by thousands of viewers. Eventually, the 4 were caught, prosecuted, but the broadcast became legendary because it was one of the first live TV signal hijacks used explicitly as a political protest, unlike some other less serious hijacks on this list. On January 4th, 2000, kids in the Philippines were watching Teletubbies on GMA Network, which was one of the most popular children's shows on TV at the time. We all know the Teletubbies, as much as some of us would want to forget it. I know a number of folks who grew up with this show and thought it was just some strange fever dream they had, but right in the middle of the broadcast, the show cut out for a few seconds. Instead of the weird, multicolored aliens with pure black eyes kids were used to gawking at, the screen showed a still image of Rosanna Rosas, who was widely known in the Philippines at the time for adult roles and some adult film work. No, she was not making a guest appearance on the Teletubbies. This was obviously not supposed to air during a kid's time slot. The interruption was short, but it didn't matter. Parents noticed immediately. Kids noticed. People called the station asking what had just happened. The image vanished, Teletubbies came back on, and the show continued as if nothing had happened. Turned out that the wrong clip was loaded or triggered during live transmission somehow, and because it was live, it went straight to air. Even years later, this gets brought up as one of the strangest, most uncomfortable live TV mistakes in Philippine broadcast history. On November 10th, 2017, people in Malmö, Sweden tuned in to Mix Megapol, a major commercial radio station. Normally, it's non-stop music, DJs, ads, the usual, but that morning, listeners started hearing something completely different. The station had been pushed off its own frequency. For about 30 minutes, the normal broadcast was replaced by an unauthorized transmission playing propaganda. Anyone listening in the area heard the takeover instead of Mix Megapol's programming. Someone had used a pirate radio transmitter strong enough to overpower the station's signal in that area. As long as that transmitter stayed on, the real station couldn't reach listeners. After about half an hour, the hijacked signal finally stopped and Mix Megapol came back on the air. That was the end of it. They never caught who did it. On November 26, 1977, viewers across southern England were watching the evening news when something went wrong. Very wrong. The picture stayed normal, but the audio was suddenly taken over by a deep, calm, distorted voice that identified itself as Vrilon, a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command. And for over 5 minutes, the voice delivered a strange message claiming to come from space. It warned humanity about nuclear weapons and the negative impact we lowly humans were having on the environment, urging people to abandon their weapons and live in peace. Now, obviously this was not a studio mistake. Someone had overridden the broadcast audio signal, which again meant whoever this was knew exactly what they were doing. Investigators also believed the hijacker had to be physically nearby to pull this off, but nobody was ever identified or charged. Decades later, it's still one of the craziest broadcast interruptions in history.
Starting us off at the number 10 spot is the late Queen Elizabeth II. So it's no secret that there are quite a lot of people out there who are not fans of the royal family. And while for some it might just be about an overall lack of likeness towards the monarchy, there are many out there whose hatred stems from a deep-seated belief that everyone in the royal family are in fact shape-shifting lizard people. This all started from some footage that was found online of the Queen where some particularly strange eyes seem to appear out of nowhere. In the video, the Queen is standing at what appears to be a game of sorts, and then all of a sudden her eyes change to look almost like some sort of crazy demon. Immediately people were freaked and jumped to the conclusion that it was because she was a shape-shifting lizard. But others blew it off as just her having bloodshot eyes. Now, listen, I don't know about you, but I've never seen a bloodshot eye that was completely black before. I'm just saying. As you can imagine, this footage did not help the royal family's rep of being from the constellation Draco and only further cemented the belief that they are all evil lizards. What do you think? Coming in at number 9 is Katy Perry. So here's the thing about lizard people. They tend to be exclusively pinned on celebrities. Now there is some reasoning behind this. It's because the shapeshifters are supposed to be evil, and so they take over the bodies of celebrities or leaders in order to be able to have the power to wreak havoc on our world. One of the celebs that people swear is a lizard is none other than Miss Teenage Dream herself, Katy Perry. The footage that brought her into this world comes from an interview she did years ago where for just a millisecond it appears like her eyes change color from a sort of blue to green, and just for a second it looks like her pupils turn into slits. Oh, I should mention that apparently a calling card of these lizard people is that they have green eyes, so her eyes supposedly changing to green was seen as proof of her real lizard self peeking through. Suspicious? You tell me. Next up at number 8 is Rihanna. I refuse to believe that Riri could be an evil reptile alien sent here to wreak havoc and cause evil, because number 1, she's like the chillest human ever, and 2, I mean, she's Rihanna, so I don't want it to be true. But it looks like even the good ones aren't safe according to believers of the lizard people. The proof comes from some kinda sus footage from what looks like a live talk show or something, and even though it's a bit blurry, it does look like there's something weird going on. If you pay close attention, it does appear that her eyes turn into slits for just a millisecond before turning back to normal. I mean, should we be worried? Could she really be a lizard person? I mean, even if she was, she would easily be the most beautiful lizard person I've ever seen, so at least there's that. Coming in at number 7 is Angelina Jolie. From what I have come to understand about the conspiracy race of the shape-shifting reptiles that walk the earth with us, is that more often than not, it is the eyes that give them away. Maybe their eyes are the hardest to control shape-shifting wise? I'm not totally sure, to be honest, but either way, there are definitely some strange videos out there with some weird things going on in the eyeball region. One of these videos is of A-lister Angelina Jolie. In this particular interview, you can see she's blinking her eyes a ton, which you might not think much of, but when you zoom in really tight and slow down the footage, you can see that there is a half a millisecond where it looks like her pupils elongate into slits before snapping right back into normal. My question is, does the blinking have anything to do with the trying to control their eyes from changing? Again, I have no clue what's true and have no facts to back that up, but the video is for sure a little strange. Next up at number 6 is Shakira. Once again, another pop princess with the voice of an angel has been accused of being one of the evil lizard people sent to destroy the planet. The clip that caused the uproar is from an interview a few years ago where, yep, you guessed it, her eyes slightly change shape for a millisecond. For starters, her eyes are already quite dark, so it's a little hard to tell at first, but when the video gets slowed down and you zoom in, I will admit I can kinda see where people are going with the whole eyes changing changing thing. There is a moment where it does kind of look like her pupils shift into a thinner shape, and dare I say the iris kind of goes more coppery? Is that a sign? I have no idea. Truth be told, it might not be quite as obvious as some of the other ones on the list, but nonetheless, there are many out there that insist she is among the shapeshifters. Apparently, it's not just her hips that don't lie, but her eyes too. Coming in at number 5 is Lady Gaga. Okay, let me make one thing very clear. I'm a huge fan of Lady Gaga, like huge. I think she's an amazing artist and just a super badass person. All of that being said, I am fully aware that many people think she's a total weirdo, and like if lizard people did turn out to be real, I could see why people would suspect Gaga to be one. I mean, if anything, what is more camp than being a shape-shifting reptile masquerading as a human, right? The main clip that brought Gaga into the suspect list of shapeshifters was from a live interview several years back, and just like almost every alleged lizard person, the clues were in her eyes. Now, first off, her eye makeup, gorgeous, but if you peer a little deeper into those eyes, you might notice something kinda looks off. She looks down for a second, blinks her eyes, and then just ever so slightly you can see that it looks like her pupils change shape and get slightly thinner for a second. Then boom, back to normal. Also, she did once say in an interview that she has always loved to shapeshift. I mean, she was talking about her hair and makeup, but was it a clue? Is this solid proof she's a lizard person from the constellation of Draco? I guess it depends on who you ask.
During News 4's live 9 p.m. newscast on CW43 in Oklahoma City this past February, meteorologist Aaron Brackett was presenting the weather using a sky cam near Penn Square Mall, pointing northwest when something unusual caught his eye. I start seeing this odd object, and it's flying faster, moving faster than anything I've really observed out there, Brackett said. The bright, fast-moving object zipped across the night sky on the live feed. Chopper 4 pilot Mason Dunn analyzed the footage and said he was, quote, pretty confident this wasn't a plane or a helicopter. The light was moving unusually fast. In October 2024, WSAZ in Huntington, West Virginia shared video of a strange creature spotted in Ritter Park. A woman named Brittany Keller was driving to work early in the morning when she saw what she described as a strange-looking creature walking among a small group of deer. Curious, she stopped and filmed it. Whenever I stopped to take a better look, I realized that it was something I'd never seen before, she told the news. It's a strange video. I mean, clearly this is not a deer. When Keller posted the video online, people started guessing what it could be. Some thought it looked like a lemur. Of course, though lemurs only live in Madagascar, more than 9,000 miles away. Others joked about it being something supernatural, but one local expert, Andy McKee, told WSAZ that it, quote, looks more like a fox with mange. Mange is a skin disease, of course, caused by mites that make animals lose fur and develop scabs, giving them that odd, almost alien-like look. But some people also said this could be an escaped coati, which apparently some people keep as pets. Hopefully that's not the case though, because this thing looks very thin. If it were a coati, it'd be a malnourished one for sure. During a live call-in show on an Islamic TV channel, things were going as usual, people phoning in to ask questions, get advice. Then a woman calls, saying she believes someone had cursed her with black magic and that a jinn had possessed her. In Islamic belief, jinn are spirits that exist alongside humans, sometimes good, sometimes not. She said she'd been praying non-stop to fight the thing off, but nothing seemed to be working. At first she sounded shaken, but still in control, at least she sounded like herself. But then, about a minute into the call, her voice changed. She starts making these low, inhuman growling noises. Then she suddenly breaks into this loud, unhinged laughter. Whether she was actually possessed or, just in some kind of mental distress or faking it, nobody really knows, but it is a spooky clip. In the summer of 2014, CNN covered a story out of Norwalk, California, a suburb just 25 miles from downtown Los Angeles. Security footage taken just before 4 a.m. on July 29th showed what looked like a big cat slowly walking behind a parked car. No one could figure out what this thing was. At first, people assumed it was a mountain lion. It's not unusual for Southern California, but the state's Department of Fish and Wildlife made a statement saying, quote, large cat-like animal captured on surveillance video is not a mountain lion. So what was it then? Well, They couldn't say for sure. Some people said it looked like an African lion. Others thought it was a leopard. One local commented that it might be a younger jaguar trying to, quote, re-establish itself in the southwest. Police started patrolling the area more often in case the thing showed up. While Norwalk's Facebook page just filled up with comments, one sums the situation up pretty well. I don't know what's scarier, that it was a mountain lion or that officials still can't identify it. In 2023, a man in Clovis, California filmed a freaky animal raiding his chickens. I mean, how would you react if you saw this thing creeping into your yard? You probably don't need me to tell you, but this looks exactly like the chupacabra. The story was featured on KMPH Fox 26 News, showing footage of the animal moving through the yard. Turns out, though, this was very likely a coyote with severe mange. Peter Tira, a public information officer for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, said, "These are parasitic mites, little bugs that will reside on the host animal, and over time cause it to lose fur through bites and whatnot. Infection breaks out, and it creates a very unpleasant and unsightly looking animal." According to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, this coyote appears to have a weakened immune system, which allowed the mange to spread across its entire body. Crystal Woodward, founder of Pinky Paws Search and Rescue, said her team was planning to capture and treat the coyote. Woodward's group has treated other mangy coyotes before and said, "I believe every animal has a chance to live and should not be suffering like that." On February 11th, 2013, viewers across Montana and Michigan got the shock of their lives when their emergency alert system was hacked. During the broadcasts of The Steve Wilkos Show and Barney and Friends, the familiar emergency alert system warning tones suddenly sounded, but the warning was anything but ordinary.
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living.
And then it went on to say, "Do not attempt to approach or apprehend these bodies as they are considered extremely dangerous," and so on and so on. The alert interrupted at least 5 TV stations across Montana, Michigan, Wisconsin, and New Mexico. Now, it was pretty obvious this was a hoax because nobody was calling the cops about corpses springing up from their graves, but if you were a kid watching this, or, just really gullible, you would have been pretty freaked out. The hack was traced overseas. Investigators discovered the stations had failed to change their default passwords on their emergency equipment, so they were vulnerable. And to this day, we still don't know exactly who did this. But here's the thing, 4 years after the original 2013 zombie hack, it happened again. On February 28th, 2017, radio station WZZY in Winchester, Indiana, had their emergency alert system equipment hijacked as well. The same dead bodies rising from their graves audio from 2013 played over their airwaves. The incident prompted the cops to immediately issue a public statement clarifying that the station's alerting equipment had been hacked and there was no actual zombies walking around. During a live aerial segment filmed by a Fox 5 New York news chopper, something strange showed up on camera, a small orb-shaped object flying over the Hudson River near Lower Manhattan. The clip is only a few seconds long, but it's definitely weird. The object seems to glide past the skyline at high speed, and what makes it even stranger is how it changes color. At first it looks white, maybe see-through, but as it moves closer to the chopper, it turns blue before moving out of frame. Whatever this thing was, it moved way faster than anything else in frame, and seemed too low for a normal aircraft, and it'd be pretty silly to say this is a bird. Any thoughts on what this could be, though? Share them down below. Remember when there were all those reports about weird orbs and UAPs over New Jersey last year? There were some pretty interesting videos, but this one is particularly strange. Back in December, ABC News showed this odd footage of a colorful object in the sky. They had no idea what it was, and neither do I. It reminds me, though, of an energy blast from Dragon Ball Z, the way it's, I don't know how you describe it, moving, it's just got like energy and electricity moving through it. It's actually pretty cool if, it weren't hovering in the sky. On March 13th, 2010, people in Georgia sat down to watch what they thought was their usual Saturday evening news program on Ameti TV. Instead, they were hit with a breaking news report announcing that their president, with a name I'll butcher if I try to say it out loud, so I just won't even attempt it, had been assassinated. Russian tanks were invading the capital. It ran war footage, fake political statements, and claims that the Georgian army had begun fighting back. What no one realized was that this was all fake. And that's because the broadcast looked and sounded just as authentic as any real news story they'd cover. The channel said that the broadcast was meant as a simulation, but that message only appeared briefly at the start, and then most viewers missed it. So within minutes, panic had spread across the country. Some soldiers actually took up positions prepared for an actual attack. One man shouted, "What the hell's going on?" before collapsing from a heart attack. The channel's director stated that the purpose of the program was to demonstrate to Georgians the threats that they really were facing, saying, "The really unpleasant thing about yesterday's report, and I want everyone to understand this well, is that this report is as close to reality as possible to what may really happen, and to what Georgia's enemies keep in mind." End quote. Unfortunately though, because of this broadcast, 3 people ended up dying in all the panic and chaos. In 1959, a few thousand people in Michigan were trying to watch the World Series when their screen just went black for the entire first 3 games. Turned out it wasn't a tech failure. A former station employee named Harold Lindgren had snuck into a relay station miles out of town and jammed the signal by shoving steel wool into a pipe in the transmitter. He'd been fired a few weeks earlier and wanted to get back at the boss who let him go. He called the whole thing a diabolical plot. And to be fair, kind of was. He drove out at night, climbed a fence, sabotaged the equipment with stuff he'd just grabbed from his kitchen sink. Technicians from Chicago and Green Bay had been brought in to figure out what happened. When police finally tracked him down, Lindgren admitted to everything. He didn't really seem to care about hiding it, just wanted to make a point. In 1980, WSB-TV in Atlanta had a bizarre incident during a kids' cartoon block. Oh boy. The Plastic Man comedy adventure show was on. Yeah. That show that we all remember. Well, right in the middle of a commercial break, the screen suddenly cut to a still photo of a woman for a couple seconds, nude. The image had been spliced into a Georgia Forestry Commission ad. It seemed like an accident, but apparently it wasn't. The station's general manager, Fred Barber, later admitted that 2 master control operators had done this on purpose. They were the guys who handled overnight sign-offs and morning startup duties. And apparently one of them liked splicing random things onto tapes, and this time no one on the station's morning staff caught it before it aired. The operators were fired immediately. Even though it was over in seconds, it caused a huge stir. Because, well, first of all, the time slot, worst time and place to show a naked woman on TV, and this was a major station. So the rules around tape handling and sign-on and sign-off procedures were tightened. On January 4th, 2000, the Teletubbies was playing on the GMA network in the Philippines. On this particular morning, for just a few seconds, the screen cut to a photo of actress Rosanna Rosas with her chest exposed. Teletubbies was weird enough as is. This was the last thing these young viewers needed to see. Obviously, this immediately triggered a warning from the country's media review board. GMA later explained that the whole thing was a mistake caused by an employee who was fixing a computer at the time. Apparently, he pressed the wrong button while trying to help with some system repairs, and somehow that caused the wrong image to flash on air. That sounds hard to believe. I mean, that really does sound like the excuse you give when you just don't know what to say. Oh, I pressed the wrong button, and then it was boobs. Anyway, they insisted nobody did this as a prank. The network apologized and promised to tighten up controls. The employee was never named. Wasn't much follow-up on whether he kept his job, but it's definitely freaked out parents and probably gave a few kids a weird memory of Teletubbies. They probably grew up thinking this was some bizarre fever dream. On October 8th, 2022, in the middle of a live newscast on Iran's state-run TV, the broadcast suddenly cut to a masked figure and a black screen showing Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei surrounded by flames with a digital target on his head. It only lasted 12 seconds, but this was very loud and clear. The screen also showed photos of 4 women who had recently died during the Mahsa Amini protests, along with the phrase "Women, Life, Freedom," repeated over and over. Mahsa Amini was a 22-year-old woman who died after being arrested by Iran's morality police for supposedly not wearing her headscarf the right way. Her death quickly set off protests all across the country. The group behind this hack called themselves Adalat Ali, a hacktivist collective that had already leaked internal government documents in the past. State TV anchors were clearly rattled when the feed returned. I mean, just look at this news anchor's face. People inside and outside Iran shared clips of the hack almost immediately, and it spread fast online. No one really knows how deep the investigation went or if anyone got caught, but even though it was under 15 seconds, this was one of the most direct, high-profile hacks ever pulled off on live Iranian television. Now, for obvious reasons, I can't actually find footage of these Soviet pirate broadcasting hacks. I mean, it was the Soviet Union, everything was very locked down, but back in the Soviet Union, where the government completely controlled radio and TV, pirate broadcasting wasn't done as a prank. This was one of the only ways to hear anything outside what the government wanted you to hear. As early as 1966, there were reports of a teenager in Kaluga hijacking the radio to spread fake news about a nuclear war breaking out with the US. That kind of hoax was rare, but actual hijackers were popping up constantly, especially during the 70s and 80s. They'd jump onto relay stations during programming gaps and broadcast their own music, their own opinions. Sometimes the state would lash back in newspapers, calling them radio hooligans and accusing them of jamming frequencies needed by emergency aircraft. Whether that part was true or just scare tactics isn't totally clear. I imagine there was a lot of exaggeration going on. Oh, there are even hotlines for citizens to report pirate signals, but these underground broadcasters kept showing up, proving how desperate the people were for anything that wasn't just government propaganda.
Next up at number 4 is Isaiah Carey. Several years back in 1995, there was a reporter for NBC who became an overnight sensation after a hilarious video of him swallowing a grasshopper aired during a live broadcast. People kind of fell in love with him because he had such a huge reaction and totally switched up his entire demeanor after he accidentally swallowed the bug. However, not too long after, some people noticed something was a little off about the video, and some even started to wonder if swallowing the bug was an accident at all. What's strange about this video is that if you pay close enough attention, kinda looks like his tongue is actually aiming for the bug, just like a frog reaching for a fly. Not to mention, he has quite a big tongue compared to most people, and it kinda looks a little pointy. Either way, after he swallows the bug, he immediately turns away from the camera, and some have suggested this is to hide any further evidence that he was actively shapeshifting at the time. But also, I would probably turn away from a camera if a bug flew into my mouth without warning too. I don't know, man. Either way, the video is hilarious, so let me know what you think. Evil reptile or funny human? Coming in at number 3 is a mysterious creature. So this video is definitely one of the weirder ones on this list, cause like actually what the heck is happening? Inside what appears to be some sort of cave, a pair of glowing orb eyeball things peek out from behind the wall, but when whoever is actually holding the camera advances on them, they quickly retreat back behind the wall. Like, not gonna lie, it's kind of creepy. The creature then continues to peek out to see if the cameraman is gone before stepping out completely, showing its unnerving form, and then suddenly bolting away deeper into the cave, never to be seen again. Now, the real question, of course, what is it? Is it a shapeshifter, a weird alien, some other weird thing we have never heard of or seen before? I mean, all I know is I would not want to see that alone in a dark cave by myself. I just have a bad feeling it would kill me and eat my flesh. I'm just saying. Coming in at number 2, a security guard. It goes without saying that presidents are not going to really go anywhere without their security guards. But what do we really know about their security? And if there is reason to believe that politicians themselves are a part of the alien lizard race, then wouldn't it make sense that their protection would be too? Well, speaking of, back in 2012, during a speech made by President Obama, footage of the audience captured captured a peculiar looking security guard in the crowd. At first glance, you might think it's just like a pale, bald dude standing there, but when they pan to the side, it straight up looks like he has no ears. I mean, what is going on here? It's giving Voldemort, if you ask me. Even weirder is when the video zooms in. If you really pay attention, it kind of looks like his head is pulsating, which, truth be told, I have no clue what that could be about, but lots of people have come forward saying it's definitely footage of him shape-shifting right before our eyes. I mean, would that mean that everyone in the CIA is a lizard person, or just a select few? I want to know how it's decided what people get taken over by the alien lizard overlords. What is their system is all. I'm just wondering. And last up today in our #1 spot is Timothy Geithner. As I mentioned, it's not just A-list movie star celebs that have been accused of being a part of the lizard race taking over mankind. Among some of the most accused are politicians and even the staff that work under them. Former Secretary of the Treasury under President Obama's presidency is among one of those that some have come to believe is a dangerous lizard person hiding behind the face of a human man. The clip that raised some eyebrows and added him into the long list of potential involved personnel came from some kind of speech, and it definitely is very odd. Unlike most of the others on this list, it wasn't his eyes that had people questioning him, but the skin surrounding them. For a moment in the video, it looks like Timothy shifts into his reptile form, and the scales begin to show through the skin around his eyes, until suddenly he touches his face and it magically disappears. Like, could this be faked? I mean, of course it could, it's the internet. But like, was it? Or is it just a really super creepy video proving an alien race of lizard people? You tell me, man.
When a news crew went looking for ghost stories, they might have gotten more than they bargained for. In 2021, WNYT News Channel 13 in upstate New York did a live report from the Green Ridge Cemetery as part of a Halloween segment. Reporter Sam Hessler was on air in the pre-dawn hours, walking among the tombstones while a guide shared spooky historical tales. The broadcast went smoothly until viewers at home noticed something on their screens that even the crew on site missed. In the background, behind Sam, a misty white figure seemed to drift between the graves. It was brief and subtle, a flicker of what looked like a person or a fog moving fast. After the live shot, one astonished viewer alerted the station, and Sam herself was stunned reviewing the footage. She hadn't seen anything in person. WNYT later acknowledged the eerie moment, assuring folks the clip was unedited and truly aired live. The internet, of course, lit up with ghost caught on live TV posts and theories. Some paranormal enthusiasts called it one of the best accidental ghost sightings on a news broadcast, evidence of a spirit roaming the cemetery. Skeptics countered that it could have been a camera glitch, a passing car's headlights reflecting, or even a stray piece of insect or dust close to the lens creating a blur. The station's own write-up teased it as something almost too crazy to be real and encouraged viewers to watch and decide for themselves. You're watching HGTV and suddenly an emergency alert pops up warning that the end of the world is here. What do? That nightmare scenario actually happened to some TV viewers in Southern California in September 2017. Without warning, regular programming was interrupted by the emergency alert system. The typical alert banner scrolled, but then things got truly terrifying. A booming male voice came on and proclaimed, "Realize this, that in the last days extremely violent times will come." Imagine hearing that out of the blue on a Thursday morning and you're just trying to love it or list it. Understandably, people freaked out. It sounded like a prophecy of an imminent apocalypse or some wartime broadcast. As dramatic as it was, this turned out not to be the work of pranksters or an alien overlord, but simply a technical glitch and incredibly bad timing during a routine test of the emergency alert system. In short, the system glitched out and aired a fire and brimstone sermon again by mistake. Cox and Spectrum cable customers heard what sounded like a doomsday warning, but it was just Pastor Chuck Swindoll quoting the Bible, 2 Timothy 3:1, on an FM station. Both the cable company and the FCC confirmed it was an error, not a hack, but not before scaring the heck out of viewers. In the middle of a live US Congress debate, viewers suddenly saw something Russian. In January 2017, politics junkies watching a C-SPAN online feed got a strange surprise. The feed, which was showing a live House of Representatives session, abruptly switched to Russia Today, the Kremlin-funded news channel, for about 10 minutes. Given that this occurred amid intense news about Russian cyber interference, many thought C-SPAN had been hacked by Russians in real time. C-SPAN quickly investigated and put out a statement. They didn't believe it was a hack, but rather a routing technical error. The leading theory is that some glitch caused the RT feed to literally overlap and replace the C-SPAN feed on their site. In simulation terms, it's like two different programs momentarily cross-wired. The timing, however, was almost comical. It happened just hours after a power outage oddly halted a Senate hearing about Russian hacking. Even Waters, whose speech was interrupted, remarked on the curious timing and demanded a clear explanation. Seeing Moscow news pop up in a US government broadcast felt like a scene from a spy movie, or a reminder that the simulation has a twisted sense of humor. Our final glitch was literally one word caught in an endless loop, and of course, that word was Russia. Also in January 2017, I guess a bad month for TV gremlins, MSNBC's show Hardball experienced a freaky moment. Journalist Dave Ignatius was talking to host Chris Matthews about, ironically, Russian interference in US politics. He said the word Russia and bang. The screen flickered and started repeating Russia, Russia, Russia over and over in a feedback loop. Chris Matthews looked confused as the glitch kept going for several seconds, echoing Russia in a creepy cadence until the control room cut to commercial. Given the climate at the time, Twitter exploded with jokes that Moscow hackers or the Kremlin Matrix had struck again, but most likely this was just a bizarre technical malfunction. Perhaps a failing satellite feed or encoding error that caused a few seconds of audio/video to loop. The fact it looped that particular word on that particular topic, well, that was gold for conspiracy lovers and also late night comedians. MSNBC assured it wasn't intentional and nothing nefarious was found. If we do live in a simulation, it definitely has a flair for dramatic irony.